Reporter checking in. Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Diaz. And good morning, everybody else. Wait just a minute, let everyone log on. And we once again have 909-496-4733. I'm trying to remember who that is.
I believe it's Anthony Serrano. Maybe he can check in.
Okay,
Yeah,
so Mr.
Yes, Anthony Serrano.
Thank you, Mr. Serrano, and we'll change the display of your telephone number to your name.
Thank you.
And if you can go on mute, I think before it didn't show on mute, even though you were on mute, and we didn't have any problems, so that's fine. So
Okay, I'll go on.
great, thank you. Oh, there you, yeah, you now are on mute. Thank you. All right, so good morning, everyone. My name is Alan Lilly, presiding hearing officer of the State Water Resources Control Board's Administrative Hearings Office. Today is January 12th, and this is the third day of the hearing that the Administrative Hearings Office is conducting on the draft cease and desist order prepared by the prosecution team against BlueTriton Brands, which I call BlueTriton. I'm not going to ask everyone for appearances. You all made appearances on Monday, and everyone's name shows up well on the Zoom display. So we will just go ahead and dive in. Just two preliminary matters. We did receive a statement of Natalie Stork's qualifications, which we will label as Exhibit PT 311 and add it to the folder. I don't know if my staff has already done that. They may have, but if not, we will add that to the folder of the prosecution team's exhibits. And then I received an email from Mr. Donlin saying that because of a schedule change, or it's changed in the briefing schedule in another matter that his firm is working on, he withdraws his request to not hold hearings on Thursday. So at the end of our proceedings today, we will discuss what the appropriate schedule is for moving forward, so we can hopefully wrap up this round of the hearings this week. I will say, Mr. Lowe, it's not critical. Well, there you are. We were just seeing your roof, not you. There you are. We certainly want to be able to see you today along with everybody else. And I will report that Nicole Mullen of my staff is out today, and she is certainly our most adept staff member for displaying exhibits. We will miss her today. So if we're a little slower than usual, it's because we have some other staff members substituting for her, but we still should be able to get the exhibits posted relatively promptly as we need to. So I believe that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that where we finished yesterday was on behalf of the prosecution team, Mr. Petrozelli offered into evidence exhibits PT1 through PT 310, and we will assume now he is adding PT 311 to that request. And the BlueTriton attorneys said they wanted to have time to review the exhibits to determine whether they had any objections. So I said we would defer till tomorrow. Then it was tomorrow morning, which now is this morning, to consider that. So we will proceed with those. But Mr. Lowe, your hand is up. Do you have a question before we start?
Yes, I just wanted to see if you were going to be able to honor my request for a family matter this afternoon.
Yes, I anticipate, my plan is to cover BlueTriton's objections to the prosecution team's exhibits, any other parties' objections if there are any, and to rule on that, and then to proceed with the testimony of Mr. Lawrence, direct and cross-examination, which I suspect we will be able to finish within a few hours, just based on the length of his testimony, his written proposed testimony. So I actually have to leave at 4 today. Mr. Lowe, what is your cutoff time for today?
At 2 o'clock, if I could.
All right. I don't think that's going to be a problem. So we'll see. I suspect we will be able to finish before noon, but we never know. Things can come up. So, but if we get close to 2, please remind me. We certainly are trying within reason to accommodate parties' requests for schedule issues. And you did tell me about this one yesterday, so I do remember. All
Thank
right.
you.
So with that, which attorney for the BlueTriton, would like to raise, oh, wait a minute, Mr. Petrozelli, you have your real hand up and your electronic hand, so I'm supposed to see it both ways. Excuse me for missing you.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Lilly. Ms. Stork notified me that she identified a typo in her statement of qualifications after we uploaded it. There is one of the conferences she has listed, I guess, has the incorrect year. It should be 2018 and not 2017. If you would like us to upload a corrected copy, we can do that.
All right, why don't you go ahead and do that, and we'll substitute.
Okay.
If that's the only change, I don't think there's
Okay.
going to be any issue.
Yeah, and then I was going to mention my 5 p.m. hard stop today and again Friday, but it doesn't seem like that'll be a limiting factor for us today.
No, it shouldn't be.
So.
But thank you for reminding me. Okay, Mr. Silver, it looks like you have do you have your hand up, or am I just missing? No, go ahead. But go off mute.
No.
Okay, no hand up. All right. All right. I don't see any other hands up. So with that, we will go ahead. Which attorney for BlueTriton would like to discuss the objections, if any, to the prosecution team's exhibits?
That will be me, Mr. Lilly, Shonda Grady.
All right, please go ahead, Ms. Grady. Tell us which exhibits the BlueTriton objects to and the reasons. And if it's a lot, we can sort of go through sequentially. Is it going to be a lot, or is it a few?
It's just a couple.
All right, why don't you go ahead and just tell me the first one, and then I'll probably just ask the prosecution team to respond.
Sure, and I can give you context too. It's BT 17, which appears to be data sheets, which are referenced in the testimony of Mr. Eggers, which is PT 10 at paragraph 65 and 66. Quite bluntly, we just have no idea what these are. There was no explanation of the source of this information, and it doesn't match up with similar types of documents that we've seen.
All right, so stop there. Let me, and whose testimony was that that's referenced? PT 10 is Mr. Eggers. Okay. Just a minute. I'm sure Mr. Petrozelli, you're getting that too. But I'm going to look at the paragraphs 65 and 66. And
We put Mr. Eggers.
Wait.
Sorry.
I'll call on you. Just a minute, Mr. Petrozelli. I'm a little slow here. I want to read it first. So paragraph 65 says available information shows that respondent has diverted more than 7.6 AFY of water, the excess of which is subject to the State Water Board's permitting authority, and almost every year information is available. And then there's a citation to both PT3 and PT17. And then the following paragraph 66, I won't read the whole thing, but it discusses how respondent submits the groundwater recordations to the San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District, and talks about what the data shows, and then cites to PT17. So I do agree, Mr. Petrozelli, the PT17 is referenced, but there is nothing that authenticates it. So what is your response to the objection?
Well, I mean, one, I was going to ask if we could put Mr. Eggers' testimony on the screen.
Oh, okay. We if we want to,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes. So Mr. Anderson, please post PT10 and go to page 22. Excuse me, but that's certainly fine. And go ahead. While he's doing that, you may go ahead.
Yeah, I believe those are the raw spreadsheets from the groundwater extraction reports.
Okay.
And those were obtained from San Bernardino Municipal Water District and other records of the State Water Board as described in paragraph 66. I believe.
Okay,
if we
well,
want clarification from Mr. Eggers, we can put him we can
Okay,
go from there.
Ms. Dias, I see your hand. Whoops, no, your hand was not. Excuse me. That was my glitch.
Ah.
Okay, so we're going to go to page 22. And we will go to paragraph 65, which is down near the bottom of the page. And yeah, scroll. So we have to scroll one more, Mr. Anderson, so we can see 60. There we go. All right. So, Mr. Petrozelli, I think we still have a problem that these have not been authenticated.
Well, I think what they're describing is that based on diversion information, the respondent submits the San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District. That's how they're drawn. That's how that conclusion is being drawn.
Okay, I understand that, but there's nothing in here that says how PT-17 was prepared. That's the problem. And maybe, we have some flexibility in the rules here. Is Mr. Eggers available this morning?
I think he's trying to sign on.
Okay.
He said he's having some trouble signing on.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I think the easiest thing is for you to just ask him. I mean, it's a valid objection, but
My understanding, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, if you can ask him what he did to prepare these, we can probably address the objection. Of course, Ms. Grady can then ask follow-up questions if she wants to. Anyway, go ahead, Mr. Petrozelli.
So my understanding is that these were provided by San Bernardino. Mr. Eggers has indicated that he feels comfortable appearing by audio at this moment.
Okay. So
If we want to ask him, but I do believe, he was questioned extensively and he could have been asked about this particular.
No. Don't blame BlueTriton for that. It's your obligation to authenticate your exhibits, not theirs. But we can do that now. So, Mr. Eggers, I see you are here, at least by audio. Can you go off mute? All right. Mr. Eggers, are you here now? You went off mute. Can you speak so we can make sure we hear you?
Yes.
All right. So, Mr. Petrozelli, you can go ahead and ask Mr. Eggers the questions you need. I mean, it's better for him to testify about PT-17 than for you to say about it, because he's under oath and you are not. So why don't you just ask him basically how PT-17 was prepared, and then if Ms. Grady still has any follow-up questions, she can ask him, and we'll do it that way.
Mr. Eggers, are you familiar with PT-17, and would it help if we put it on the screen?
Yeah, that would help.
Okay.
All right, so we'll put PT-17 on the screen. Just give us a moment. It's a fairly big file, so it may take just a moment to load. Okay, and maybe Mr. Anderson, we're on the first page. Yeah, there, just expand a little bit and scroll up to the top. While he's doing that, I'm going to just get my paper copy here.
And perhaps we can wait until this is done being put on the screen.
Okay, so it's up. We have the first page up on the screen. Go ahead and ask your questions of Mr. Eggers.
So, Mr. Eggers, can you first describe what this is?
This appears to be a PDF printout of a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet originally, that is a compilation of data received from the San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District for the data on the groundwater recordations. It also would include data that was found in the microfiche and the records in our record rooms.
And can you describe how this was prepared?
This was prepared by Natalie Stork, but I'm I'm familiar with part of the preparation. I've added records to it as well after Natalie left the division, and it was prepared in Microsoft Excel by inputting data received from the San Bernardino Valley into the spreadsheet.
Can you describe how we received that data?
The data was received by email and also was taken from files in the record room.
Okay, that probably, do you have anything more, Mr. Petrozelli? I think that does at least establish a foundation for this.
While I hate to put her on the spot, we do have Ms. Stork available if you need further clarification.
Okay, let's see. Ms. Grady, I think this does, and I was wondering the same thing you were wondering, which is where this came from. I think this does explain how this exhibit was prepared and basically what the data in it are. Are you going to continue your objection, or will you withdraw your objection based on this explanation?
Well, I do have just a couple quick questions, I guess. There's additional, we're just looking at this first page and it's a 13-page document.
Okay, so please go ahead and ask your questions of Mr. Eggers, and if you need to, of Ms. Stork. I hope Ms. Stork's on this morning as well. It's Mr. Petrozelli. Is Ms. Stork on this morning?
Yes, she's here. I can't tell if she's signed into Zoom.
I'm here. I'm on.
Excellent. Good morning, Ms. Stork. All right,
Good morning.
Ms. Grady, go ahead. Ask either Mr. Eggers or Ms. Stork your questions, please.
Thank you. This will be directed to both of you. I'm just trying to understand the entirety of what this document is. We're looking at the first page of what appears to be a 13-page document. Who created it, the source of the information, and if this document or the data was shared with BlueTriton at all during the course of this proceeding.
Okay, so ask your questions one at a time.
I apologize. I gave you 3 questions. You're correct. So my questions are, I guess, for the two of you, who created which portions of this document?
And since you can't both talk at the same time, Mr. Eggers, why don't you start? And then Ms. Stork, if you need to add anything, go ahead and add anything.
I think actually that question is perfect for Natalie, since my understanding that she created the file originally. She can speak to that better.
All right, so Ms. Stork, please answer the question. Who created this file?
I believe I did. Sorry, I think my camera's frozen. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, and that's fine
Okay.
for this.
I'll just stop the video. It just froze. To the best of my knowledge, and based on the title, I believe I created this file working with the data from San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District.
Okay, and just because it sounds like you're struggling to recall with specificity, if I can ask the person, and I apologize, I didn't catch who is running the exhibits today, if you could please kindly just scroll slowly through the pages so that Ms. Stork has an opportunity to review the entire document and refresh her recollection.
Okay.
Thank you.
So yeah, Mr. Anderson, yeah, it's going to kind of blink, but he's trying to scroll through it slowly. Ms. Stork, tell us if you want to stop at any point.
I just want to clarify, I probably made this 6 years ago, so I'm doing my best.
Well, please do your best. That's all we can ask. Okay.
With the caveat that this is a PDF of the original Excel file that would have been created.
And that's because we asked for all exhibits to be submitted in PDF format. So, okay, so that we've gone to page 8 of 14, which has some totals at the bottom. You want to stop there for a minute, Ms. Stork? You can just take a look at that. And then it looks like, should we move? Do you want to take a look at that, or can we move on to page 9?
We can move on.
All right, so then page 9 starts with a graph.
Okay, I remember this now. This is what I used to make figure 2 in the report.
And did you prepare this graph?
Yes.
All right, and then go on to Mr. Anderson. Please go on there. Oh, excuse me, whoops, Mr. Eggers, go ahead.
One thing to add that that graph has been updated since the 2017 RI, which would be the last time that Natalie worked with that graph. So you can see that it goes up to 2020 now.
All right, and then Mr. Anderson, please go forward with page 10 and 11. Let's have more data. And then it looks like there's another graph on, more graphs on 12 and 13. Okay, so that's a quick view of a fairly detailed 14-page file. So Ms. Grady, please proceed with your questioning of either witness if you have further questions.
So I'll start with Ms. Stork. Ms. Stork, after having reviewed the document, are you familiar with the document in its entirety?
I have viewed the entire document, and I produced the initial versions of this through when my first report was submitted, and I moved on from the division.
And the source of the data that you used to create this?
I would say San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District. They sent me a spreadsheet of all of the data that was submitted to them as part of the groundwater recordations program. It's possible I may have also used data from either the groundwater recordations or the hydrodynamics reports, or Dames and Moore. I can't remember if there were production volumes in there.
And Mr. Eggers, you said that you updated this data. Did you add the information that is from 2017 forward, or the end of 2017 forward? I apologize.
Yes, I believe there's only 3 years that were updated, 2020, 2019, and 2018.
Did you otherwise change the data that was in this spreadsheet?
No, not that I can recall. I'm not sure, maybe some colors might have gotten switched. Some things are handled automatically by Excel, but the data would not have been changed.
And do you recall the source of the data that you relied upon to update this spreadsheet?
The updates were from data received from the San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District by email.
Okay.
All right, does that complete your questions, Ms. Grady?
It does, thank you.
And do you still?
May I make a clarification?
Please.
Go ahead, please.
So since it's been a long time for me and I'm trying to refresh my memory, I just went back to the 2017 report, page 9, regarding the source of the information. And I believe based on this, that all of the data included in it would have been from Mr. Hedrick.
And who is Mr. Hedrick with?
Oh, the San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Stork. All right. So, Ms. Grady, do you still object to this exhibit with this clarifying information?
I have one more question for either Mr. Stork or Ms. Eggers.
Other way around. It's Ms. Stork and Mr. Eggers.
I sincerely apologize. I have not finished my first cup of coffee this morning.
It's okay. We're all waking up. Please proceed.
My question was, my last question directed to the two of you is if either of you asked BlueTriton or its attorneys, its representatives, to review this data or the spreadsheet.
And Ms. Stork, why don't you answer first, and then Mr. Eggers can answer second.
I can't recall.
And Mr. Eggers?
I did not.
All right.
Thank you. With that, we'll withdraw our objection to that document.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Anderson, for displaying that. So, and Ms. Grady, I don't want to rush you. there are 310 exhibits. So if it sounds like I'm rushing you, I don't intend to. I do want to get through the hearing today, but there are a lot of exhibits, and I certainly want to give you what time you need to state your objection. So please state your next objection.
The next thing.
Excuse me, Mr. Petrozelli?
Yes, as a matter of accommodation, Mr. Lilly, if you would like the Excel spreadsheet, I can see if we can provide that, since that might be easier. You know, sometimes converting these large spreadsheets to PDFs can be challenging sometimes.
I certainly understand that. Let me tell you, I appreciate the offer. Right now, I'm not going to ask for that, as you're probably all aware, because I have been including everyone on the service list. My office is trying to compile a complete set of all of the groundwater extraction notices. And as part of that, we're going to prepare our own spreadsheet, which we will potentially have the party, post or add to the administrative record where the parties can review this. I mean, I don't think there's going to be a lot of dispute here. There's the underlying data are in these notices, and there's no question about those, and then some from the San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District. So I think the only real question is if somebody entered a data point wrong, and we can point that out if we need to. So I appreciate your offer, and we'll put it on hold for now, but we may follow up on that later. But thank you. All right, with that, Ms. Grady, you may move on to the BlueTriton's next objection to the prosecution team's exhibits.
The next objection is to a document identified as PT 87, which is the State Water Board order identified in the spreadsheet of index of exhibits as State Water Board order number WR 95-10.
Yes.
There's no reference to this in any of the testimony. And so the relevance is my objection.
Okay. Frankly, I don't know whether any or all of these decisions and orders needed to be submitted as exhibits. The board is authorized, it's the regulation I mentioned yesterday. The board is authorized by California Code of Regulations, Title 23, Section 648.2, to take official notice of such facts as may be judicially noticed by the courts of the state. And I am pretty sure that includes all adopted decisions and orders of the board. So whether or not it's relevant, I think it can come into the record basically so the parties have a convenient copy of what the board can take official notice of anyway. So I'll just say for all of the board decisions and orders in the PT's exhibits, and there are many of them, I think they can come in under that regulation that the board, and thus the AHO, in preparing a proposed order, may take official notice of them. Now, whether or not a particular order is relevant to any of the legal issues, I think you can address that in your briefs, and of course the prosecution team can address that in their briefs, and we can go forward. But I think that they meet the threshold for admissibility, and what you're saying may really go to the weight that the board should give to any of these documents rather than their admissibility. So do you have anything further to say on that?
That was not my concern.
Okay, please tell me. I'm sorry if I misheard.
No,
Please
that's okay. My concern is the record just being full of information that's not being considered by anybody and not relevant to anything. Generally speaking, judicial notice is permitted of state records. It's not typical to take judicial notice of decisions, which are essentially case law. And it's certainly not typical in court to take judicial notice of things that nobody is citing to in the case for any reason whatsoever, because that just clutters the record and makes something appear to be a part of the record when it was never looked at or considered by anybody. I mean, if we did that and just accepted every state record that anybody proposed putting in, it would make a very confusing record upon review if it ever got to that. And that's my concern, is just ensuring that our record is what's actually at issue here. And I'm not seeking to be overly aggressive and exclude things or to challenge the basis of which things are being considered. Quite candidly, there was a lack of foundation for quite a bit of information, but I understand that we have a little bit more flexibility here, and I'm not trying to be tedious, but with 87, it is legitimately not cited anywhere that I can
Okay.
see in anything.
Okay, so let me correct one thing. Mr. Petroselli, let me talk, and then if you still need to say something, you may. I don't know how often courts cite to water board decisions. I certainly have seen reported appellate decisions where they do, but more on point, the water board very frequently cites to prior board decisions and orders as pressed for their precedential effect in its decisions and orders. And I am very confident that the proposed order in this matter will have citations to some at least prior board decisions and orders. And I'm pretty confident it will not cite to all of the ones that the prosecution team has offered here, but will cite to some of them. And of course, the parties may cite to them in their closing briefs. So I disagree with your objection to the point that the testimony did not refer to this order, because I think the prosecution team may put these decisions and orders into the record, and the board may take official notice of them, and the prosecution team, BlueTriton, or any other party may cite to them in their closing briefs, even if no witness testified to them. So with that clarification, I do share your concern that this does seem to fill out the record quite a bit, and I'm not sure it's really necessary. I think, frankly, and I've done this in the past, when we prepare proposed orders, we can cite to board decisions whether they're in the record or not.
Absolutely.
Under official notice. So it's a long way of saying this probably was not necessary, and it is voluminous and burdensome, but I don't think there's ground for objection. So I'm going to allow into evidence, for the limited purpose of basically allowing the board to take official notice of the board decisions and orders that the prosecution team has offered. So, Mr. Petroselli, do you still have something you want to say, or does that address your issue?
I guess two things. Just this particular board order is referenced and discussed in the report of investigation in the attachments, specifically on page 94 of PT3. That's page 94 of the PDF.
Okay, and again, I don't know if that matters or not. For my ruling, they can come in so that they're in the record, so the board can take official notice of them, whether they're cited or not.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Lilly. And my second is, it's both a comment and a question. It's a regarding practice, and perhaps what you may prefer in future proceedings. But in some proceedings, I've had the impression that the board would prefers these types of documents, board orders, and decisions, if they're going to be relied on by parties, offered into the record as exhibits. But if your preference in these proceedings would be for us to offer them by official notice and then cite them much as we would case law, that may perhaps be a method of relying on these precedential board actions without inflating the record in the same way.
All right, well, that's a fair question, and I suspect the hearing notice was not clear on that point, because nobody's ever asked that question before. And here's my answer. My answer is, for board decisions and orders that are posted on the board's website, and I'm pretty sure that includes all of these, there is a link to board decisions and a link to board orders. They do not, neither you nor any other party needs to offer them as exhibits. I think it could be useful, if you cite any of these in your closing brief, to refer to add a link to the board's website so that other parties will know where to find them. And I try to do that in my proposed orders. I don't know if I always do, but my view is that at that point, they're like reported court decisions and may be cited by the parties and by the board without having them in the record. So I hope that may save you at least a little bit of time and energy in future proceedings, but they're in here, so I'm going to let them in here.
Thank you for that clarification, and I think all of our attorneys over here in OE appreciate it.
All right, so Ms. Brady, I hope that at least explains to you what I'm doing. They're admitted for the purpose of convenience for the board's taking official notice of them, which the board could take whether they were admitted or not. And whether or not a particular order has a precedent that's germane to the issues in this case, of course, you and all the other parties may address in their briefs.
I agree. And I appreciate the discussion with Mr. Petrozelli regarding how this could be handled moving forward, because I think there are different procedures in different state water board proceedings, and toggling between board proceedings and court, where you would submit a request for judicial notice along with your brief for things that you're citing for that purpose, rather than identifying them as exhibits early on, does cause a little confusion for the bar. So that is we appreciate the discussion on this.
Hopefully I've explained that, but since the board clearly will almost always review prior board decisions and orders when it's preparing a new order, I think that's a method that we can use going forward. All right, so thank you. So Ms. Brady, you may proceed with your next objection, assuming you have any more, if you have any more.
There's only one other, and it is PT 309.
Okay, let me get that. And would it help to have Mr. Anderson display that?
Yes, please.
And I don't know if we have paper of that or not.
And it was referenced in Mr. Eggers' testimony, Mr. Vasquez's testimony, PT 7 at paragraph 118, I believe.
Okay, so let me get PT 7, paragraph 118. So I'm getting up, we'll put up 309 first, and then if we need to, we'll put up PT 7 and go to paragraph 118. Okay. All right, so it may make this go a little faster. I'm going to just read paragraph 118 of PT 7, which may avoid having to display it, but we can display it if you need to. It states, in addition to those exhibits referenced above, the prosecution team offers into evidence PT 309, a true and correct copy of an article about horizontal wells from the July 1973 issue of Journal of Range Management. And we now have that. Mr. Anderson, maybe you can scroll to the top of the page just so we can see the title, if it'll let you. There we go. All right, so what is your objection, Ms. Grady, to this exhibit?
My objection is relevance, and I will just offer for context. I believe, and I'm not trying to misstate or characterize Mr. Eggers' testimony yesterday, but I believe that he stated that he had taken a photograph from this article for use elsewhere, and there was no other discussion about the substance of the article in the written or oral testimony. And quite candidly, I haven't had time to analyze this article to determine if it's relevant or to.
Okay, so let me just tell you, I am looking, and I don't know if Mr. Anderson, please just scroll to page 2 in the bottom of the page.
But I think this was offered just to show the source of the photograph.
Just scroll down a little farther, just there, right there. So figure 3 in this article, which is on the second page of the exhibit, is the figure that was in the slide presentation. I recognize that it's the same figure, and I could, if we need to, I'll just see if I can find it here, because I think I can pretty quick.
I think we can all stipulate that it was otherwise admitted.
So it's PT 9, slide 7, contains a copy of this figure. So again, if you're I don't understand your objection
You know what?
on relevance.
Apologies. I will cut this short. Apologies. We withdraw that objection.
Okay.
And we're done.
All right. So with that, I will admit into evidence exhibits PT1 through PT311 with the understanding that the prosecution team is going to submit a revised version of PT311 that corrects that one date in Ms. Stork's statement of qualifications, which is going to be, say, 2018 and instead of 2017. But I don't think there's going to be any issue about that, but we might as well get the accurate one in. All right.
Confirm we will not object to her.
We are pretty confident that Ms. Stork is doing the best she can to state her statement of qualifications accurately. All right. All right. With that, then we can go on. And why don't we just take a break while we get set up, a 5-minute break. We are going to proceed with Mr. Lawrence's testimony. So Mr. Anderson, why don't you go ahead and get that posted? I believe it's BTB 10. Is that correct, Mr. Grady?
Mr. Lawrence's testimony, I believe, is BTB 10. I apologize. I'm toggling between my platforms.
You're doing fine. Thank you. And are you going to be the attorney for BlueTriton?
I am not. So I will let Ms. McGuire confirm.
Okay. So here's what we'll do. We have it up on the screen. I just think it'd be useful to, since we're shifting gears, I want to kind of put away some papers and get out some papers. So it's 9:44. Let's reconvene at 9:50, and we'll start with Mr. Lawrence's testimony at that point. So please do not log off, but you may turn off your camera and microphone for the next 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, I think we're almost all back. Looking for Mr. Petrozelli and Ms. McGuire. There's Mr. Petrozelli, Ms. McGuire. I'm waiting for Mr. Lawrence is here. And there's Ms. McGuire. Okay, and just a caveat, my staff has advised me that they're having some internet issues. So if we have a glitch posting any of the exhibits the parties want us to screen share, please be patient. We're doing the best we can. And I see Ms. Grady's hand up, but I have a follow-up to Mr. Petrozelli's question that I wanted to clarify. Mr. Petrozelli, I was thinking about this during the break. You asked about whether the prosecution team or frankly any other party needs to submit copies of decisions and orders of the State Water Board as exhibits. And I said no, because they are available on the State Water Board's website. And that's generally true, but some of the newer decisions the board has not posted, I think because of web accessibility rules. So I would say that my caveat, and again, this is really for future matters more than for this one. And if we remember, we'll try to put this in our hearing notices in the future. But if it's a decision or order that you think is relevant and that you're going to want to cite in your briefing that is not on the board's website, and that is true for some of their more recent ones, then you should submit it as an exhibit and ask us to take official notice of it. But if it's one of the hundreds, maybe thousands of orders and decisions that are posted on the board's website, then you do not need to submit it as an exhibit. So does that answer your question with that clarification, Mr. Petrozelli? You have to go off mute though to tell us for sure. We can't hear you yet.
Yes, yes, it does. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Grady, your electronic hand is up. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I was just going to inquire if you'd like us to give our opening statement now or at the beginning of the next phase.
I'm sorry, you broke up. If we want to what?
Provide BlueTriton's opening statement.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Thank you for reminding me. This is the beginning of BlueTriton's case. So yes, if BlueTriton would like to make an opening statement, now is the time. I allowed the prosecution team 5 minutes, and I will allow BlueTriton 5 minutes. So does one of the attorneys for BlueTriton want to make an opening statement?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lilly. Robert Donlin on behalf of BlueTriton. I think Ms. Grady is inquiring whether you would prefer we do this now or before we submit rebuttal testimony. We are happy to provide it now, and it's very short. It's
yes.
Prepared. Okay.
Now is the time, and I apologize for not thinking of that. I had it on my script and I didn't read it. But anyway, go ahead. Mr. Donlin, you may proceed with BlueTriton's opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Lilly. I will refer today in my opening statement to BlueTriton or BTB as BlueTriton in this matter. We are going to make a brief opening statement and then jump right into the testimony of Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence's testimony will summarize the written testimony he submitted on December 17th. His testimony will focus on his personal knowledge of Strawberry Canyon, BTB's operations in Strawberry Canyon, and BTB's and its predecessors' response to and participation in the prosecution team's investigation that resulted in the proceeding before you today. As a preliminary matter, BTB appreciates and understands the important role that the State Water Board plays in the administration and enforcement of rights to surface water in subterranean streams in California. BTB believes, however, that the State Board's enforcement authority should be discharged consistent with California law, and that its enforcement actions should not be the means to expand the State Board's authority over the state's water resources. That is the role of the legislature. As you know, BTB filed a motion to dismiss on August 5th, 2021. The motion argued that the prosecution's draft cease and desist order fails to allege facts or appropriate legal authority for the Administrative Hearings Office or the State Water Board to find that BTB's diversions are unauthorized. The prosecution's case, including the testimony presented on Monday and Tuesday, makes no effort to establish that any of BTB's groundwater diversions are subject to the State Water Board's permitting authority under the clear standards set forth in Water Code Section 1200. Rather, the prosecution invents a new legal theory for the State Water Board permitting authority over spring water, which not only flies in the face of more than 100 years of California water law jurisprudence and the clear standards in the Water Code, but also contradicts the longstanding policy and practice of the State Water Board itself.
Excuse me, Mr. Donlin. I'm going to speak for Ms. Dias, the court reporter. She would really appreciate it if you slow down a little bit.
I'm sorry, Mr. Lilly.
And I'd rather you speak a little more slowly so we can all absorb it, even if you go a little over 5 minutes. So
Okay.
please slow down a little bit. This is very important, and I want to make sure I can absorb it.
Happy to. And we're happy to submit this. I am reading a prepared statement. So I think your procedural orders authorize us to submit this in writing. We're happy to do that.
And that is fine. And we won't mark it as an exhibit, but we will put it in your exhibit folder with today's date. So please proceed at about 80% of your prior speed.
All right. The prosecution's case also advances several novel legal positions with respect to surface water rights and contract and administrative law. For example, the draft CDO improperly reinterprets numerous contracts and court records concerning water rights in Strawberry Canyon. The prosecution's case also misapplies the law of pre-14 appropriative rights and riparian rights. While we ultimately believe it will be unnecessary for the Administrative Hearings Office and the State Water Board to reach these issues due to the lack of the State Water Board's permitting jurisdiction over BTB's water sources, we believe the prosecution's case attempts to significantly expand the State Water Board's authority over riparian and pre-14 rights. On Monday, counsel for the prosecution stated that if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, then it is a duck. When it comes to matters concerning the State Water Board's permitting jurisdiction over percolating groundwater and pre-14 appropriative rights, the State Water Board's enforcement office must produce more than unsubstantiated assumptions, wishful thinking, and quips. The prosecution must allege and prove facts pursuant to applicable legal standards before the State Water Board can divest a water right holder of groundwater rights validly established under California law and recognized for more than 90 years. The prosecution has the burden to establish that BTB's diversions are unauthorized, and it has not met its burden. For these reasons, BTB is confident that the Administrative Hearings Office and State Water Board will ultimately reject the draft cease and desist order based on the numerous material defects in the prosecution's case. But we appreciate the opportunity that this proceeding has provided to correct the State Board's records regarding BTB's collections in Strawberry Canyon.
All right, does that complete your opening statement?
It does, Mr. Lilly, thank you.
Mr. Lilly,
Yes,
I'm
Ms.
having
Dias,
a-
please go ahead.
I'm having a crisis here. I need about 3 minutes.
All right, we'll give you 5, 6. So we will adjourn till 10:05 to let the court reporter address your crisis.
Thank you.
Don't log off, but turn off and sign off and video off and microphone off.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Ms. Dias, are you ready to proceed?
I am. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll wait for Mr. Donlin and Mr. Petrozelli and Mr. Lawrence to come back. Okay, we are back. Ms. Dias has told me that she is ready to proceed. At the risk of interjecting a little levity into an otherwise serious proceeding, I will say, Mr. Donlin, this is what happens when you talk too fast. The court reporter has equipment malfunctions.
I chased her out of the room.
And I'm just joking. You were doing fine, but it is an important reminder to all of us. Court reporters have a very, very difficult job. And frankly, I don't know how they do it. But one thing all court reporters have told me is they don't like it when people talk too fast. And I'm certainly one of the worst offenders. So let's all try to remember to talk a little more deliberately. I know I sometimes am trying to encourage people to wrap things up, but that doesn't mean talk faster. So with that, so which attorney is, Ms. McGuire is going to be asking the questions of Mr. Lawrence. So Ms. McGuire, are you ready to proceed?
I am, Mr. Lilly.
All right, so Mr. Lawrence, please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you will be giving in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right. Ms. McGuire, you may proceed with your questions of Mr. Lawrence. And just as a reminder, this is an opportunity for Mr. Lawrence to summarize his testimony. He certainly does not need to read it or cover it all. I have read his entire written testimony. I read it once early on and then again yesterday afternoon to prepare for today. So with that, you may proceed with your questioning.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence, for the record, would you please provide your full name?
My full name is Larry Allen Lawrence.
Could we pull up BTB Exhibit 10?
Okay, I think we had it up before, so hopefully we can get it up fairly quickly here. All right, we have the first page of BTB 10 on the screen.
Perfect, thank you. Mr. Lawrence, could you please take a look at what is labeled, I believe if we scroll down a bit further, the testimony of Larry Lawrence in support of BlueTriton Brand's case in chief. And it's dated December 17, 2021. Is it familiar to you?
Yes, it is.
Did you prepare this testimony?
Yes, I did.
Could we scroll to page 10? I think we could scroll just a bit further down, and it may actually be page 11. Keep going. Your numbering system's a little bit different. Here we go, to the bottom of the page. Thank you. Mr. Lawrence, is that your signature on the bottom of the page?
Yes, it is.
Could we now?
And, you know, Ms. McGuire, I'll just tell you, and this is something for all the parties. I noticed a lot of people have submitted declarations for their witnesses' testimony. And just for future reference, you don't need to do that. When the witness swears at the hearing, takes the oath to testify, and then affirms that his or her written proposed testimony is in fact his or her testimony, that satisfies the requirement for the testimony. So there's no problem with doing a declaration like this, but just so you know, it's not necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Lilly. Could we put Exhibit 11 on the screen, please? Okay. And that's BTB Exhibit 11.
Okay, we're getting BTB 11 on the screen. It is now posted.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence, is this your curriculum vitae?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Could you describe your educational and your professional experience prior to joining Nestle Waters North America in 2003?
Sure. So I attended Cal State University Fullerton. I received a Bachelor of Science degree in mechanical engineering. Shortly after that, went to work in food processing industry as an engineer. I was design engineer, equipment design engineer, and managed projects. I did that for about 2.5 years, and then moved on to another firm where I managed metal forming, the design and manufacturing of metal forming equipment and water processing equipment as well. From there, I worked there for about 3 years, and then I moved on to the URS Corporation as a senior engineer, working primarily on water projects, wastewater projects, and remediation projects. I managed engineers, biologists, and geologists, other scientists, as well as took on the task of managing projects for URS. That's where I was introduced to the Nestle Waters North America Corporation. I did a few projects with them. And in 2003, in May, I was hired by Nestle Waters North America as natural resource manager in Southern California. And I covered Southern California and Arizona at the time. I worked on several projects as a natural resource manager. I managed water sourcing to the various factories in the area and managed the spring sites associated with the spring water production in Southern California and Arizona. From there, in 2012, my region was expanded to cover all of California, and then again expanded in 2019 to cover the Western United States. Ultimately, I'm responsible for the budgeting, forecasting, water supply to the various business factories in the area, and any projects associated with water supply, permitting, and also the siting of new facilities.
Mr. Lawrence, could you briefly describe the transition from Nestle Waters North America to what is now BlueTriton Brands Inc. or BTB?
Sure. In 2021, Nestle Waters North America was name was changed to BlueTriton Brands as part of a stock sale of the parent company of Nestle Waters North America. And that stock sale took place, I believe, I'll just say it was in 2021, early 2021. And the name change occurred in second quarter of 2021.
What's your current job title with BlueTriton Brands?
My current job title is Natural Resource Manager.
And could you please describe your current responsibilities with BTB?
Sure. My current responsibilities are to manage the Western United States spring water supply and water supply to 6 factories in the Western US. I manage the budgets for that. I manage all of the maintenance and engineering work that's associated with the management of these facilities. We have about 14 spring sources that I manage ultimately for the various different locations across the Western US. I'm also responsible for forecasting future growth in the response to future growth in our business. So as our production increases, I'm responsible for predicting and also forecasting the supply of water to meet that demand, and any new facilities that would be needed. I would lead the development of those facilities.
Mr. Lawrence, are you responsible for applying for any federal and state permits for BTB's operations in Strawberry Canyon?
Yes, I am. I'm responsible for state, federal, and local permitting for all of the facilities that I'm responsible for.
Can you briefly describe those permits?
Sure. For the Arrowhead Springs facility, we have a private water source operator license, which is obtained through Department of Public Health, California Department of Public Health, Food and Drug Branch. We also have a special use permit through the U.S. Forest Service, San Bernardino National Forest, that covers the facility access and maintenance and operation for the facilities in Strawberry Canyon.
Are you responsible for any other filings that are required by law to be filed by BTB for its operations in Strawberry Canyon?
I am responsible for the, as has been discussed, the recordation filings. They do come to me. I've been responsible for the Strawberry Canyon recordation filing since 2003 when I started with the company.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence, I'd like to just specifically for the next round of questions, focus on BTB's operations in Strawberry Canyon and ask you to walk through your history with the Arrowhead collection and conveyance system. And for the purposes of our questions, I'm defining collection system to reference tunnels 2 and 3 and boreholes 1, 1A, 8, 7A, 7, 7A, 7B, and C.
Okay.
As well as boreholes 10, 11, and 12. And then for the conveyance system, what I'm referring to is the pipeline itself, but also any anchors, pressure release valves, and electronic equipment associated with that pipeline.
Okay.
And then periodically I'll use the term operations just as a shorthand reference to the infrastructure. And then I'm referring to both the collection and the conveyance system operated by BTB in Strawberry Canyon. So let's start with your first days working in Strawberry Canyon. When was the first time that you actually visited Strawberry Canyon?
My first site visit to Strawberry Canyon would have been in May of 2003 as part of an introductory hike that we did with my predecessor and my boss at the time. We didn't hike the entire canyon. We hiked the upper springs 1, 1A, and 8, 2, and 3. That was, like I said, in May of 2003. I don't recall the exact date. That was my first time on site there at that location. I had done some work when I was at URS with Nestle Waters North America, but that was down at the lower end on the private property on an old tank farm location there.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Could you describe the collection and the conveyance systems that are in Strawberry Canyon?
Sure. There's a combination of 2 tunnels and then several borings, horizontal borings, that I think was described relatively well in the depiction from Mr. Eggers' presentation yesterday. And that those are all natural, or I should say gravity flow systems. There's no pumping, there's no siphon type operations. It's all natural flow to the through the borings and the tunnels. That water is collected in generally 3-inch pipes and then all transported down to a common single 4-inch pipe, again through gravity. We do have pressure relief systems, pressure control and pressure relief systems built into the pipeline at about a 300-foot elevation change for each one. There's, I think, 15 total on the system. As the water is transported down the pipeline, we pick up the lower spring 10, 11, 12 is tied in. And then the water from that system flows continually down the pipeline to the mouth of the canyon. The pipeline itself is mounted above above ground through most of the forest property. When we get to road 1N24, out just at the Strawberry Creek crossing there, the pipeline transitions underground. The pipeline that is above ground is 304 stainless steel, 304L stainless steel, and then it transitions into high density polyethylene plastic pipe below ground. Water then continues down that path, goes to the private property, Arrowhead Springs Hotel property, where it's stored into stainless steel storage silos. And then from there, on demand, the water is taken from those silos and loaded into trucks at the load station, which is about 2 miles down gradient of the storage silos on the private property. The pipeline's controlled by an electronic control system. We have radio and cell phone network that really monitors and manages the facilities there.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Has the system been modified since your hiring by Nestle Waters North America in 2003?
Yes, it has. In October of 2003, there was a fire in the area called the Old Fire. It was a massive fire, about 90,000 acres or so were burned. Some parts of the community burned. Certainly the area in Strawberry Canyon and the hotel property itself burned. The pipeline itself was generally destroyed through that fire. Portions of it had separated, portions of it burned. And the spring catchments themselves, the interior piping systems had burned as well. The boreholes and tunnels themselves were not harmed, but the collection system was destroyed. So in November of 2004, I worked with the Forest Service and other agencies in the area, California Highway Patrol and a few others, to gain access, divert springs, and close springs in. And then we put a plan together and rebuilt the pipeline under the guidance of our special use permit at the time, and with the guidance of the U.S. Forest Service. The pipeline had originally been laying on portions of the ground. It was cabled to rocks and trees in its original design, and also traveled down into the ravines in the canyons. As part of that process, we worked with the Forest Service to upgrade that piping system a bit. We bridged many of those canyons. We knew that if there was significant rain, that there was going to be landslides in the area. So we installed some bridging, and also installed the pipeline on 3-foot stanchions above the ground throughout the Forest Service where the pipeline was above ground. Beyond that, we added the pressure relief or the pressure controls, so we could manage the pipeline a little more effectively, and installed a new electronic system on as well.
Mr. Lawrence, could I just get clarification from you? You said that the old fire occurred in 2003.
Correct. Yeah, October and November of 2003.
And then when did you begin working on the repairs to the conveyance system?
Our first contractor walk, I'll call it, was in November of 2003, shortly after the fire was still burning in areas. We had gained access to go and turn off. There was some concern that there might be some hillslide issues with water flowing the way it was out of broken pipe. And so we were given access to go up and redirect some of that and turn some of the sources off that we could. And then subsequent to that, we continued to work throughout 2004 and completed the project in about December of 2004 is when we went back online.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Could you explain how BTB monitors or tracks the water collections from its collection facilities?
Sure. So historically, we had a meter at the bottom of the pipeline that we track all of the flow through the system. And then that meter is a electronic meter. It's managed, or I should say it's recorded, and that's what we do. That's what we had traditionally done our reporting off of. We also have mechanical meters up at the spring sites, and those were used to determine the percentage volumes coming from different sites, but we didn't have recorders on those. Some of them had they were not as reliable as the mag meters are, and so in 2020, as part of the work with Forest Service, we decided we upgrade all of these meters while we were up there working, and we upgraded all of the meters to mag meters. So now we have a system of meters that are all electronically connected and calibrated annually and recorded through a data acquisition system.
Does the U.S. Forest Service review the improvements that you've made on the pipeline system?
Yes. So anytime we're going to do any improvements or any significant work beyond maintenance, we submit a work plan with Forest Service. Much of that work requires some hot work permitting, and so we do have a hot work permit process with the Forest Service, and we manage most of that work through that. Keeping in mind that access is generally through flying in and helicopters, so it's generally going to be a hot work permit requirement.
Okay. You mentioned it briefly a moment ago, but could you go into a little more detail about the storage facilities and the transfer station where the pipeline or the collected water is placed into tanker trucks?
Sure. So we have two 80,000 gallon storage tanks on site in the private property of the hotel. It's kind of the traditional location for the storage of water coming out of Strawberry Canyon. Those silos are filled through the pipeline. The pipeline is generally going to continually run. It does, the flow rate changes throughout the year and throughout the day even. But ultimately those silos are filled through the pipeline. And then those silos then are used to store water for tankering. We fill tankers about 2 miles away, right along Highway Old Waterman Canyon and Highway 18. And we have two load stations, so 2 tankers can fill at one time. And those systems are all electronic and are set to fill the tanker to appropriate fill levels. And all of that is controlled again through I don't want to call it a SCADA system, but a data acquisition system and control system.
So to restate your answer, is it correct to say that the storage facilities and the transfer station are on private property, not owned by BlueTriton?
Yes, a portion of the pipeline out of Strawberry Canyon, the storage silos, the piping between the storage silos and the truck station are all on private property.
Is any of the water that's by bless you.
Thank you.
Is any of the water collected by BlueTriton diverted for use by that private party?
Yes, there is a portion of water diverted to use at the Arrowhead Hotel. 20% of the flow that comes down through the Strawberry Canyon pipeline is diverted to the hotel owner.
Thank you. Is any of the water that's collected by BlueTriton returned to Strawberry Creek?
A portion of the water is returned to Strawberry Creek in 2020, working with the Forest Service and as a request of the Forest Service, working with them in our adaptive management plan and our special use permit. They asked if we could discharge water back into Strawberry Creek as opposed to at the silo location. So if the silos overflow today, in the past, they would overflow into onto the private property there, and that would be the overflow of the system would overflow the silos onto the private property. Today, we have the ability installed in 2020 to overflow, to control that overflow and essentially overflow that system into Strawberry Canyon, just below Springs 10, 11, and 12.
And as I understand it, the U.S. Forest Service was involved in that relocation of the discharge point in your system?
Yes, we proposed. We put a proposal together. We shared it with them. It took a few months for approval. We gained approval through the U.S. Forest Service to complete that project.
Is that discharge metered?
It is metered.
Is the pipeline itself ever shut down? And if so, for what reason and how long?
The pipeline, the only time that we shut the pipeline down is for significant maintenance or cleaning. And it's usually for a very short period of time. We have had, since the installation in 2003, we've had one failure. We had a rock slide that created a failure. That was our longest shutdown. It was about 5 days. Generally speaking, when we do maintenance, we plan it for a portion of a day. The pipeline will go down for 8 hours or so. Cleaning will take sometimes 2 days.
Okay. Is the same amount of water collected by BlueTriton in its pipeline each year?
No, this system is a gravity-fed system and a natural flowing system. So we only collect water that comes into it naturally. So whatever, it's really based on how much water is available through the borings and the tunnels. And that's based on what the recharge here looked like prior.
Okay. Mr. Lawrence, I'd like to turn to the State Water Resources Control Board's investigation of BTB's water rights in Strawberry Canyon. And that is the Water Rights Division Enforcement Section that conducted that investigation.
Very good.
I've learned. How long have you been involved in the Division of Water Rights Enforcement Section's investigation of BTB's water rights in the canyon?
So I started on this initially. I mean, I think my first phone call was with Ms. Stork. It seems like it was in December of 2005. And that was my first interaction with the state board.
I believe you meant to say 2015.
I'm sorry, I did, 2015.
Thank you.
Just December 2015, and then again January of 2016 is I think when we've sent our first, kind of our first correspondence.
Okay. Did you communicate with anyone else from the Division of Water Rights Enforcement Section during the course of this investigation?
I initially met with Ms. Stork shortly after, I think it was in June, or we had done some planning for a site tour between January and June. And then June of 2015, we did a site tour and I met Mr. Vasquez and Ms. Stork on site. Mr. Nichols was with me on that trip. After the site visit, we did attend a couple of meetings in the state board offices in Sacramento, where there were others. Mr. Petrozelli, I believe, was involved, and there were a few others. I don't recall their names.
And excuse me, Mr. Lawrence, you said just June 2015, but I'm sure you meant June 2016 for the site tour.
I did. Thank you very much. June 2016.
Thank you.
Mr. Lawrence, you touched on the 2003 forest fire. Could you please confirm, were you employed by Nestle when that forest fire that burned through the San Bernardino Mountains occurred?
I was. My career started with Nestle in May of 2003. The fire broke out in October of 2003.
Okay. Could we bring up BTB exhibit number 16?
Okay, we will get BTB 16.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence, do you recognize these photos?
I do.
Did you take or obtain these photos?
I did. The picture on the left is a Google Earth image of Strawberry and East Strawberry Canyon. And the two pictures on the right I took, I believe, in February of 2004.
Thank you. I was going to ask if you would identify each photograph and the date that they were either obtained or taken by you.
Yeah, the Google Earth image on the left, I don't recall the date that I put that together, but it does depict the environment after the fire and identify the canyons, the confluence, and then the rim forest landslide area.
I believe there's a date in the lower right-hand corner of that Google Earth photo.
Oh yes, 1/4/2004. Thank you. It's very difficult for me to see that, by the way, but it's okay. I can see it.
And the two photos on the right were taken by you?
Yes, those were both part of a site walk shortly after the December 25th storm event. And we'd hiked, oh, thank you so much. We had hiked the canyon to determine additional damage that was done after the fires. And this is landslide, the remnants, I should say the effects of a landslide from the East Strawberry Canyon scarp.
Where did the landslide begin?
If you could please move to the left on the photo, on the Google Earth image. On the right below the words rim forest landslide, you'll see a scar on the hillside. It's a well-known landslide in the area. It is continuously sliding. It slid again in 2017 or 2014. But this is where the landslide started.
Okay.
Okay.
So, excuse me, Mr. Lawrence, just, I should be able to know, I should know this, but I'm going to just ask you, if Mr. Woolridge, just move back to the Google Earth. Are the BlueTriton facilities, the tunnels and boreholes, are they on Strawberry Canyon or East Strawberry Canyon?
They are in Strawberry Canyon.
Okay, so that's what I thought. So how did the landslide in East Strawberry Canyon affect the facilities? I assume it was then downstream below the confluence that there was an effect.
That's correct. Yeah, our facilities traveled, our spring collection takes place in Strawberry Canyon. The pipeline transverses the canyon down through and below the confluence. And so we were focused below the confluence.
Okay,
and,
thanks.
That's where the photos, the upper photo on the right is just down gradient of the confluence. If you scroll the screen up a little bit, and on the upper right of, I know I hate to be so confusing, but on the upper right photo, in the upper right portion of the photo, you'll see a text that says historic Arrowhead pipeline. That is the old pipeline alignment, and that was the ground surface prior to the landslide.
Okay, and just so the record is clear, I'll ask you to correct the typo where it says approximate ground surface prior to December 25, 2003 landslide. Obviously, that should be 2003.
That's correct. That should say December 25th, 2003.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed, Ms. McGuire.
And then the photo at the bottom, just to finish the description, the photo at the bottom is a landslide outwash covering 1N24, and you can see our older pipeline on the left of that picture where the red valve is, where the pipeline transitions from above ground to below ground in the road.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Mr. Lawrence, were any government approvals required for the repair of the pipeline system following the forest fire?
Yes, we worked directly with the U.S. Forest Service special use permit officer, Gary Ernie, on this, and Gabe Garcia, who was the district ranger at the time, to gain approval for rebuilding the infrastructure there.
Were you in the canyon prior to the December 25th date that I see in the upper right-hand corner photograph at this particular point where the photograph was taken?
Yes, many times.
And what was the cause of the debris that we see in these photographs?
This was a debris flow from the scarp at the top of East Strawberry Canyon.
And what triggered that landslide?
On December 25th, 2003, we received in the area about 5.5 inches of rain in one day, and the landslide occurred that evening. So it was the landslide. I'm not a geologist, but it appeared to become inundated and slid.
Is the erosion that we're seeing in this photograph still present at the site today?
Some of it is, but much of it is washed away. Again, this landslide is not static. It's happened. It's slid a few times since this date.
That was going to be my next question. Was this the only landslide that you're aware of that has occurred in either East Strawberry Canyon or Strawberry Canyon since that time?
I haven't seen any in Strawberry Canyon, but this landslide has occurred multiple times since 2003 in East Strawberry Canyon.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to talk about the tours that you lead in Strawberry Canyon, just to get a little background on that. Did you lead the Division of Water Rights staff tour that took place on June 15th, 2016?
I did. A portion of it.
Yes. And who attended that tour from the Division of Water Rights Enforcement section?
That was Ms. Stork and Mr. Vasquez attended.
And who was there from Nestle at the time, now BlueTriton?
It was Mr. Nichols and myself.
Is Mr. Nichols still involved with the project on behalf of BlueTriton?
He is. Mr. Nichols is a hydrogeologist, and he works with us and has worked continuously with us since.
Okay. How was the itinerary for the tour determined?
I worked with Ms. Stork to determine date and time and put together a brief PowerPoint presentation with some safety briefings and kind of clothing and water requirements and proper shoes, proper PPE, we'll call it. Also, just I think I put in that brief PowerPoint presentation a description of the transportation methods and safety around the helicopter. We also had a schedule, and we, as I recall, we picked them up at the airport at Ontario Airport as they flew in, drove to the San Bernardino Airport, flew from there, and then up to the Springs. And here I think I should correct my testimony here.
Okay.
If it's okay. In my testimony, I've done many of these, dozens of these tours over the years. And I recalled going to Spring 10 first after hearing Mr. Vasquez and reading some of the documents associated with this. I realized that we actually went to Spring 7 first, and then 10, 11, 12, and then 2. So I agree with their analysis or their recollection of it. Mine was flood.
Okay, thank you.
I just have to ask, I'm confused by that, Mr. Lawrence. This is probably not particularly on point, but why would you go from 7 down to 10, 11, and 12 and then back up to 1A and 8?
Sorry, Mr. Lilly, it's sometimes the helicopter pilot will put more fuel on his ship than he anticipates. So we'll go to one site versus the other. I don't really know what the reason was to go to 7 first. It is higher in elevation, and it does seem odd that we go to 7 and then 10, 11, 12, and then 2 because we're going up, down, and up again. But I always leave that up to the pilots.
Okay, it was just curiosity. You may proceed. Excuse me for interrupting.
And you're absolutely right to think that way. Normally, we would start at 10, 11, 12.
To that point, Mr. Lawrence, any chance that there was a U.S. Forest Service helicopter in the area?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yes, there was a U.S. Forest Service helicopter that was flying in as well. And I do believe, thank you for jogging my memory, I do believe that is the reason we went to 7 first, was the Forest Service helicopter was at 10, 11, 12 when we arrived.
Okay, thanks.
How long did the tour last?
Well, I can speak to a portion of it. I had to leave early. I was evacuated. I obtained an injury midway through the tour, right after the visit to Spring 2. And then Mr. Nichols and Ms. Stork and Mr. Vasquez completed the tour after I departed. But it was a one-day tour. I believe they were off the mountain well before the evening, so to catch their flights home. So it was just a approximately 8-hour tour.
Was the Division of Water Rights staff able to visit all the sites that they requested to see?
I believe so. Again, because of the injury I obtained heading towards Spring 3 or Tunnel 3, they did not go to Tunnel 3. It was a rattlesnake bite, and so they determined not to go down there. And so I believe they were able to see everything else other than Spring or Tunnel 3. And 10, 11, 12, 2, 1, 1, 8, 8, and 7s for sure.
How did Ms. Stork and Mr. Vasquez document their tour?
From my recollection, Ms. Stork had a GPS unit, but other than that, I would say pictures and notes.
Since the June 15, 2016 tour, has either Ms. Stork or Mr. Vasquez requested to take a subsequent tour?
I've received.
I've withdrawn, actually.
Go ahead. You may answer, Mr. Lawrence.
I've received no additional requests for tours from any of the state board members.
Okay, thank you. Let me go back for a moment and discuss the spring water collection points. By that, I'm talking about, of course, the tunnels and the boreholes in Strawberry Canyon. Can we pull up BTB exhibit number 2?
Okay, we'll get BTB 2.
Yes. Mr. Lawrence, do you recognize this exhibit?
I can see a portion of it so far. There we go. I do recognize this exhibit.
Could you read the title on the cover page that you're looking at?
Nestle Waters North America, Inc. Preliminary response to report of investigation issued by the State Water Resource Control Board staff on December 21, 2017. February 9, 2018 at the bottom.
Thank you. And I was going to ask you if you're familiar with this document, and I know you're only seeing the cover page, so you're welcome to scroll through it if you would like to.
I am familiar with this document.
Do you believe it's a true and correct copy of the first response prepared by Nestle Waters North America to the 2017 report of investigation?
Yes, I do.
You're welcome again to scroll through any of these pages if you would like.
Sure. If you would, yeah, let's just scroll through it real quick to make sure it's complete. But
yeah, it's got over 100 pages. So
yeah, that was the transmittal letter. I think this is correct.
Okay, thank you. Were you involved in the preparation of now BTB's response to the 2017 report of investigation on February 9th, 2018.
I was involved, yes.
Could you describe your role in the preparation and submission of this response?
Yeah, yes, my role was to, work with a team of lawyers and scientists, professionals, to accumulate the appropriate information that we could find to support our water rights in Strawberry Canyon. I managed budgets, I managed the accumulation of these documents, I was involved in review of the documents, and then finally in submittal of the documents.
Okay. How many responses were submitted by BTB to the board pursuant to the 2017 report of investigation?
We submitted 4 responses to the initial ROI.
And how was the content of these 4 reports determined?
They were in response to the report on investigation, each one of them.
Okay, thank you. Or actually first, could we pull up BTB exhibit number 3, please?
Okay, we'll get BTB 3. There's BTB 3, first page.
Great, thank you. Could we scroll down a bit further on this first page? Could you please read that first sentence in the second paragraph beginning the State Water Resources Control Board?
The State Water Resource Control Board also requested that NWNA submit an interim compliance plan 60 days after the issuance of its ROI for its review and approval to ensure that NWNA diversions do not.
We'll go to the top of the second page. Thank you.
Thank you. Exceed the amounts allowable under any valid basis of right.
No, that's just fine.
Okay.
So is it your understanding that this second response was prepared at the request of the State Water Resources Control Board?
It is, yes.
Could you describe the interim compliance plan that is on the screen now? Just generally, what is the content of this interim compliance plan?
I'm sorry, could you ask me the question one more time?
Could you describe generally the content of the second response dated which is on the screen, dated March 12, 2018, which is the interim compliance plan?
Okay, so it was, measurements and as it says here, measurement and report of diversions from Strawberry Creek. I'm not sure I'm fully understanding, Ms. McGuire, what you're asking me, but
just a brief description of the interim compliance plan.
Okay, yeah. So interim compliance plan was to respond to the state board with components that would be used to show compliance to our valid water rights.
Okay, thank you. Can we pull up BTB exhibit number 4?
Okay, we will get BTB 4.
Thank you. Could you tell us the date of this document?
There we go. April 10, 2018.
And do you recognize it as Nestle Water's third response to the State Water Resources Control Board's report of investigation?
Could we scroll out a little bit so I could see that? There we go.
Perhaps scroll through to the next page.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yes. Okay. Yes, I do. I do recognize this.
Mr. Lawrence, could you generally describe the content of this third report to the State Water Resources Control Board?
Yeah, the third response was a proposed investigation and monitoring plan for the state board. This was part of the request of the 2017 ROI.
Let's bring up BTB Exhibit 5.
Okay, we will get BTB 5.
Mr. Lawrence, could you read the date of the document you see on the screen momentarily? There you go.
June 20, 2019.
And if we could scroll down a bit more, do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Were you involved in the preparation of this document?
I was.
Thank you. Could you describe briefly the content of this document?
Yes, this document contained, again, was in response to the ROI, in 2017 ROI. It covered water collected not within permit authority, methods used that on site, and description of the model that we were producing or are working on, and then a final compliance plan was introduced in this document.
I see on this page in the second paragraph reference to an AMP. Could you talk about that, please?
Sure. As part of our 2018 special use permit with the U.S. Forest Service, there is a adaptive management plan associated with that special use permit, and that's what this references to. There was an adaptive management plan, paired basin study, and an annual operating plan as part of our special use permit in 2018.
So would it be accurate to say that the AMP and the studies associated with the adaptive management plan were discussed in the responses number 3 and 4 prepared by Nestle Waters North America and submitted to the board?
Yes, they were. Much of the work associated with the adaptive management plan parallels work that we had committed in our submissions 3 and 4 to the state board.
Thank you. Was a coupled groundwater and surface water model prepared as part of the adaptive management plan?
Yes, it has been.
Okay. And has that model been provided to the Water Rights Division Enforcement section of the board?
We met with we had a technical meeting on April 21st, 2021. So just in April of this past year. And we presented the initial findings of that modeling effort. And the model was produced for the Forest Service in August. I don't believe it was requested by the state board. I don't believe we've submitted it to the state board.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go back now just to the first response, what we often refer to as the historic and legal response to the 2017 response or report of investigation. Are you familiar with the historic and technical data collected and submitted by BTB to the board in its February 9th, 2019 submission? And that's BT10 if you'd like to click onto that, please.
Okay, yeah, wait a second. I need to get caught up here.
Sure.
We're shifting over to PT10. Is that what you said?
No, I'm sorry, I misstated that. It is BTB number 2.
Okay, BTB2. I'm sorry, I may have misheard or you may have misspoke, but it doesn't matter. We'll get up BTB2 and now go ahead and ask your questions.
I was going to ask Mr. Lawrence if he helped to prepare the historical and technical data contained in this first response prepared by Nestle Waters North America in response to the 2017 ROI.
Yes, I did. I did participate in the preparation of the historical information.
Could you?
And just so we're clear, Ms. McGuire, you're not trying to do this, but he didn't prepare the historical information. He assembled it. And I don't want there to be any suggestion that Mr. Lawrence was rewriting history, because I know clearly he was not. But I just think assembled historical data is what you meant, and we probably should get that clear on the record.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lilly. That's correct. I did mean assembled because much of this documentation is over 100 years old.
Yeah, Mr. Lawrence is not that old, I can tell.
Not that old. Could you describe some of the historical and contemporary sources that were assembled by BTB and submitted as part of this first response to the report of investigation?
Yes. So we researched this through multiple libraries, some of our own documentation. We found, some associated maps and things like this that were in our own possession. But we also used local and regional libraries for photos and newspaper articles, as well as some of the legal, things like the Del Rosa documentation came in from the legal side.
Do you believe that the information that was submitted by BTB as part of this first response was correct?
Yes, I do.
When was BTB first advised to prepare this report of investigation? I'm sorry, this response to the 2017 report of investigation?
I don't recall the date.
Would it have been in the December 17 report of investigation, which was issued to BTB on December 21st?
I believe it would have been.
So about how much time did BTB have to prepare the documents and submit it to the board?
Just over a month.
Okay, thank you. Could we bring up the prosecution team's exhibit number 14, please?
So Ms. McGuire, and while we're getting up PT 14, I'm going to ask how much more time you have. I've given you quite a bit of leeway here. This summary is really pretty detailed, and we've been going for about 55 minutes now. How much more time do you want to have for your questioning of Mr. Lawrence?
I think I need no more than 15 minutes. I'm almost done.
Okay, I'm going to allow it. I'll tell you, I'm a little disturbed. I think we maybe went into more detail than we needed to on some of the preliminary matters. So as a result, you really are going over the 45-minute target for direct. And of course, this all is summarizing his written testimony. But I'll allow 15, but if you can do it in less, I'll appreciate it. And it's not so much that, we have all day, except for some constraints this afternoon, but it's really in fairness to the other parties, which did, yes, the prosecution team did limit its presentation to 45 minutes. So I want to try to have some equality here. But with that caveat, please proceed. But if you can wrap it up as soon as you can, I would appreciate it.
I will. Thank you, Mr. Lilly.
Okay, so we have PT 14 on the screen.
Could we go to page 3, please? Thank you. We could back or zoom back a bit if we could to see the whole page.
Oops,
there we go. Can you read this page, Mr. Lawrence?
I can.
Could you read the 4th bullet on this page?
And just so we're clear, this is page 2 of PT 14.
Oh, we're off. We need to get to page 3, please.
Okay, that's what I thought you said. There we go. Okay, now we have page 3.
Thank you. And I would simply ask you to read the fourth bullet, which is just one sentence.
Within 60 days, submit an interim compliance plan for division review and approval to ensure that diversions do not exceed those allowable under any valid basis of right.
Could you then go to the next bullet and read the first sentence, please?
Within 90 days, submit an investigation and monitoring plan for division review and approval. The investigation and monitoring plan should include.
That's fine. And then could you go to the final bullet that begins within 18 months?
Within 18 months, submit a final report and compliance plan for division review and approval. The final report should, and then it has the 4 bullet points.
That's sufficient. To your knowledge, Mr. Lawrence, did BTB receive approvals from the Water Rights Division Enforcement Section, or for that matter, anyone in the State Water Board for its second, third, and fourth responses submitted to the Division of Water Rights?
No.
Did BTB receive any kind of response from the division staff regarding its submissions?
No.
Did you get any feedback from Mr. Vasquez or Mr. Eggers with respect to these 3 submissions?
No.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lawrence, I'm going to just ask one more question in the interest of time.
Okay.
And that is, based on the information that was collected or assembled pursuant to your direction on the historic activities by BTB's predecessors in interest, what does BTB believe it is entitled to divert based on its pre-1914 water rights in Strawberry Canyon?
So,
well, objection, I think that calls for a legal conclusion.
I'm going to overrule the objection. I mean, clearly, it's going to be based, at least in part, on the analysis by BlueTriton's attorneys. But since those analyses are in the public record, Ms. McGuire did assign all 4 of the responses. I think I'm hesitating here because, Ms. McGuire, I think you want to be pretty darn careful that you're not waiving any attorney-client privileges here. I know you don't want to waive those. But I think because there are substantial legal analysis submitted by BlueTriton that are in the record that Mr. Lawrence clearly can read, and that he clearly has been very involved in this process, I'm going to allow the question to the extent it's asking for Mr. Lawrence of his understanding of BlueTriton's position regarding the amount that's authorized to be diverted under pre-14 rights. And it's really just for a summary purposes rather than for testimony that that's the amount. So with that clarification, I'm going to overrule the objection and allow Mr. Lawrence to answer that question. But Ms. McGuire, as I say, I think you want to be careful about not asking too much, or you're going to be, somebody may suggest you've waived your attorney-client privilege here.
Understood. This is my last question.
Okay, so Mr. Lawrence, what is your understanding of BlueTriton's position, based, of course, in part on its attorney's analysis of what BlueTriton contends it may divert under its pre-14 appropriative right claims?
thank you. It's my from my review of the documentation that was provided, I believe we've provided ample information for the state board to for us to continue or maintain a diversion of 146 acre feet as we have. I think we've provided the information necessary to support that. And I think our historical documentation of the diversions support that as well. I also don't believe that BlueTriton has been making any unauthorized diversions from Strawberry Canyon.
Okay, and you probably want to clarify, you're an engineer, you got to be careful on your units. You said 146 acre feet. I'm sure you meant 146 acre feet per year.
Per year, thank you very much. 146 acre feet per year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lilly, may I have a couple of minutes to confer with my colleagues before I complete the the direct testimony of Mr. Lawrence?
Yes, yeah. Should we take a, well, do you need a break or can you just confer while we all sit here?
I think I can confer while you all sit here.
Okay.
Don't mind.
No, that's fine. Please go ahead.
Mr. Lilly,
Yes.
we are done with our direct examination of Mr. Lawrence.
Okay, so we will take a break for the court reporter's benefit as much as anyone else. But before we do, I just want to try to get some rough time estimates, and I'm not going to hold people to these exact estimates. But Mr. Petrozelli, I assume you will want to conduct cross-examination. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Lilly.
What do you have a time estimate for your cross-ex?
Definitely less than the 45 minutes allotted. So.
Okay. Do you want to say anything other than that, or just leave it at that?
Maybe 30, but I would ask you not to hold me to it.
I'm not going to hold you to it. I'm just trying to plan the rest of the day.
Yes.
All right. Does anybody else want to ask Mr. Lawrence cross-ex questions? So I see let me just write this down. I see Miss Murray, Miss Doty, Miss Fry, Mr. Bilecki, Miss Nickel. And is that it? Did I miss anybody? So I'm going to just go ahead. And again, this is just for scheduling purposes. I'm not going to hold this to you. But Miss Murray, how long do you anticipate your cross-ex? And I certainly understand there can be objections and things that'll deviate, but what's your rough estimate?
10 minutes or less.
Okay. Miss Doty, what's your estimate?
Half an hour to 45 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to put 30 to 45. Miss Fry, do you have an estimate? And you have to go off mute so we can hear you.
Sorry. 10 or under. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, less than 10. Mr. Bilecki?
10 minutes.
10. Miss Nickel?
15 minutes, depending
15.
on whether there's cover.
And Mr. Lowe, I see you have raised your hand.
Yes, 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Okay. All right. So we'll take a break. I think we'll take a break for, let's see, it's 10:14. Let's take a 10-minute break. We haven't had a longer break this morning. So we'll come back at 11:25. We'll start with Mr. Petrozelli. My goal is then to finish his before our lunch break, and then we'll do the cross-ex by the other parties and parties' attorneys after the lunch break. And Mr. Lowe, in recognition of your schedule issue, I'll let you go first after lunch after Mr. Petrozelli, and then we'll go forward. I don't have any particular order, but I just wrote down the order of Miss Murray, Miss Doty, Miss Fry, Mr. Bilecki, and Miss Nichols. So I'll do it in that order unless anybody has something else they want to do. Mr. Lowe, your hand is up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me close it.
Okay. You get in trouble if you leave your electronic hand up. You get called on. It's like being in school. All right. So let's do that. Let's come back at 11:25. I know we've been through this before. Of course, the attorneys are familiar with this, but just a reminder for everybody, please really try hard to ask short, succinct questions, and please try even harder to avoid statements before you start asking your question. It just really will make things go faster and will avoid objections. And you're not allowed to testify yourself at this point. And short questions tend to be clearer and easier to answer and easier for everyone to follow. So with that, normal reminder, don't log off, but you may turn off your camera and microphone. We will be back at 11:25. Thank you. All right. We're all coming back. Sorry for the delay. I think I was 1 minute late. Apologize. Let's make sure we get our court reporter back. All right, there's Miss Dias. We don't want to start without her. Okay, I'm going to give a few more moments for Miss Nickel and Miss Fry to come back, although we can start without them if we need to. There's Miss Fry, and there's Miss Nickel. All right, Miss McGuire, your hand is up. Please go ahead. Well, go off mute though, you first.
There we go.
Yes.
My question was, would you like me to move into evidence BTB's exhibits at this time?
No, the way we normally do that is after all the questioning is done. It just seems to be a little more efficient to do it that way because sometimes the cross-ex or redirect can take care of foundational issues and so forth. So please remember, I will try also to remember, but when we're done with all of the questioning, then is the appropriate time for you to move the exhibits into evidence.
Okay, thank you.
And well, anyway, we'll handle it then. Just so we're clear, there were some that were submitted yesterday as exhibits for cross-examination, and those already have been admitted, but the initial ones we still need to. And while we're on housekeeping matters, so I don't forget, Mr. Lawrence, you mentioned that you have safety protocols for the helicopter transport. And if you can either send those to me or arrange for Ms. McGuire or one of the other BlueTriton attorneys to send those to me. I hate to do this, but I'm such a stickler on ex parte contacts. If you can have somebody CC everyone on the service list, I would appreciate it. And then I'm going to incorporate those into our notice of site visit. I don't think you're responsible for protocols for the part of the site visit where we're walking on Forest Service land or traveling on the Indian tribe lands if we get that permission. But for the helicopter portion, I definitely want to respect your safety protocols. So if you can send those to me or make arrangements, I would appreciate it. And sometime today or tomorrow will be fine.
Happy to do so.
All right, thank you. As I've said before, I take safety seriously, and I know everyone else does too. All right, so with that, Mr. Petrozelli, you may begin your cross-examination of Mr. Lawrence. I'm noting it's 11:30. We'll definitely, even if you go more than 30 minutes, we'll try to finish yours before our noon break, even if we have to take it a little later. So please proceed, and of course, we'll post any exhibits on the screen that you want us to.
So, Mr. Lawrence, good morning.
Good morning.
I believe that in your direct testimony just now, you indicated that the pipelines transport flow received from the borings and tunnels. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, could you speak up just a little bit? I can't really hear you.
Yes. During your direct testimony just now, did you indicate that the pipelines transport flow received from the borings and tunnels?
Yes.
Okay. Is that flow received from the spring sites?
It is received from the borings and the tunnels.
And those are at the spring sites, is that correct?
At or near.
Yeah, okay. My recollection is that you described the flow in the pipes as naturally flowing.
Objection, misstates testimony.
I don't remember exactly what he said. I think he said flows by gravity, Mr. Petrozelli, not naturally flowing. So it might be good if you rephrase your question. So I'll sustain the objection and ask you to rephrase your question.
Thank you. But did you describe the water as flowing by gravity?
Yes, I did.
And that's without pumping?
That's correct.
Okay. So I wanted to move on to paragraph 17 in your testimony. So perhaps we can put that on the screen.
Okay, so this is BTB 10. We will put up paragraph 17, which is on page 4, carrying over to page 5. So we'll scroll down.
And I wanted to focus on lines 24 through 26. So, Mr. Lawrence, can you read that portion of your testimony, please?
For example, in 1910, the owners of the Arrowhead Hot Springs Hotel, AHSH, predecessor in interest to BTB, entered into a third-party contract to deliver spring water in train cars to a bottling factory in Los Angeles, owned by third-party investors. The old Arrowhead factory was bottling spring water adjacent to the AHSH as early as 1912. AHSH also built its own factory in Los Angeles in 1917, which was in the planning stages prior to 1914.
You can stop there.
Okay. We might as well finish the sentence. I think the sentence goes on.
Based upon local newspaper articles at the time.
Okay, but I wanted to focus on that first sentence. So your testimony describes this party as third-party investors. Is that correct?
Yes.
So they were not, so this party was not the owner of the Arrowhead, I think it was Hot Springs Hotel. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, can you state that again?
So this was an entity different than the owner of the Arrowhead Hot Springs Hotel.
I believe that's correct. I think we're discussing the train cars here.
Okay. And this third party, were they actually the ones transporting the water?
I don't know.
Okay. Were they bottling the water?
I don't know.
Okay. Did you assemble the newspaper articles contained in BTB 12?
I worked with the team assembling.
Are you familiar with those newspaper articles? I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. Are you familiar with them?
Let's try again. I know you're both trying really hard not to talk over each other. So, Mr. Lawrence, why don't you finish your answer, and then Mr. Petrocelli can ask his next question.
Thank you, Mr. Lilly. I worked with our team to assemble the newspaper articles.
Are you familiar with those news articles?
I am familiar with them.
Okay. So I'd like to look at BTB 12, starting with page 1. So I'll wait for that to come up, and then I'd like to direct our attention to a portion of that page.
Okay, we'll get BTB 12.
So if I could direct our attention to, I think it's the middle column approximately, and about the bottom third of the page, we'll want to blow that up. Perhaps a little more. Okay, maybe a little more.
One more click.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Lawrence, does this article indicate that a company was organized to bottle and market water from the Arrowhead Hot Springs?
Objection. The document speaks for itself.
Okay.
I'm going to overrule that objection. I think it's fair for him to answer the question.
Mr. Petrozelli, could you ask the question again, please?
Does this article indicate that a company was organized to bottle and market water from Arrowhead Hot Springs?
I think you said from Arrowhead Hot Springs. Yes.
Okay. Does it also indicate that that same company was going to build a pipeline starting from Coldwater Canyon?
I don't know that it says that.
Okay, Mr. Petrozelli, I don't know how much we need to argue about this. I mean, the first sentence of the second paragraph says it is planned to construct a pipeline from Coldwater Canyon to the terminus of the San Bernardino Valley Traction Company's Arrowhead line. I mean, we all can read it. So I'm not quite sure what the benefit is of asking Mr. Lawrence to read that, but why don't you proceed?
But Mr. Lawrence, would it be correct that the water that would be bottled under this contract was to be collected from Coldwater Canyon?
Say that one more time.
Does this newspaper article indicate that the water to be bottled under this contract would be collected through the pipeline starting at Coldwater Canyon?
Portion of Coldwater Canyon. Sure.
Okay, thank you. And then if we could go to page 16. If we could focus on the right column, it's approximately the right 2 columns, and it's in the middle of the page. Okay. Mr. Lawrence, do you recognize this news article?
Can you make it a little bigger, please?
Mr. Wooldridge, one more click if we can.
There you go.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Mr. Lawrence, if you need a moment to read it, that's fine. I need a moment to read it too,
Okay.
so go ahead.
Please let me know when you feel you've read it adequately.
Okay, I've read it. I do recognize it.
Does this article specify that the water would come from Cold Creek?
I'm going to object again, Mr. Lilly. We've offered Mr. Lawrence to establish that he helped obtain and collect these, and it looks like we're delving into his on-the-spot interpretation of different documents, which is a legal issue that the lawyers can all handle in our briefing.
I'm just asking him what the news article says.
Yeah, I overrule the objection. Mr. Lawrence has testified that he reviewed these articles and developed some conclusions based on them. So, I mean, yes, we can all read the articles, but I think Mr. Petrozelli is basically asking for Mr. Lawrence's interpretation of a sentence in there, which I think is appropriate considering Mr. Lawrence has not only read this one article, but has the broader context. So with that understanding, Mr. Petrozelli, why don't you just repeat the question for Mr. Lawrence?
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence, does this article specify that the water would come from Cold Creek?
I'm going to object again, and I apologize for being difficult, but it might help if you point him to what you want him to confirm. Maybe give a line reference.
Okay. I'm looking for a good line reference. Perhaps you can start. I think it's roughly halfway down the paragraph. It starts with the phrase "by the terms."
Okay, yeah, so we're looking at kind of the bottom. And again, we don't have any way to do this officially on the record with a cursor, so it's better just to describe it. So by the terms,
yes,
of which the Arrowhead Hot Springs Company agrees to furnish, and it lists 3 names, with the waters of Cold Creek for bottling purposes during a 10-year period. So I'm going to state the question, Mr. Lawrence, to try to address the objection, but to allow the question to go forward. Based on your reading of that phrase and your overall understanding from having reviewed various newspaper articles and other historical documents, is it your understanding that the plan that's being discussed here was for bottling waters from Cold Creek?
I believe that's what the article states, right, at the last sentence of that paragraph. Yes.
All right, Mr. Petroselli, you may proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence, are you familiar with the historical water source referred to as Indian Springs?
I am.
Okay. Was Indian Springs the same as Cold Creek?
No.
Okay.
And Mr. Woldridge, you can take this exhibit down for now.
Was Indian Springs in Coldwater Canyon?
No.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to go back to your testimony, same paragraph, paragraph 17, and direct your attention to lines 26 and 27. If we could put that on the screen. And since this sentence continues to the next page, you already read this sentence, but please read it aloud again so you can reorient us.
Starting where?
Starting with line 26, starting with the old, excuse me, start with line 27. Actually, no, start with line 26 and read the sentence that concludes with 1912.
The old Arrowhead factory was bottling spring water adjacent to the AHSH as early as 1912.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to go back to BTB 12, this time to page 17. Perhaps we can blow that up a little bit.
We will. Try one more notch if you can, Mr. Woldridge. There we go.
Maybe
Okay,
maybe a little bigger.
Yeah, so that's good. And then we can read the water of Arrowhead bottled, and then maybe you can scroll down because it's the text that's hard to read.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lawrence, do you recognize this news article?
I do.
Okay. And does this article indicate that the Arrowhead Hot Springs Company would build a bottling plant at the mineral springs?
Objection, can you point to the line that you're referring to?
Let's see.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I do have to rule on that. Excuse me. I think it's pretty clear that what we're talking about is the first three lines of this. So, Mr. Lawrence, based on your reading of the first three lines of this article and your overall understanding from the review of historical documents, is it your understanding that the Arrowhead Hot Springs Company, as discussed in this article, was planning to build a bottling works at the Mineral Springs site?
No.
Okay, and so Mr. Petroselli, if you want him to explain, you may, or you may proceed.
I'm just asking what he references this news article in.
All right.
So, yeah, just asking about the news article.
Yeah, just Mr. Petroselli, either ask him to explain or move on with another question, but please don't testify or argue at this point.
Does the article further indicate that plans were submitted to the contractors?
And it might be good if I assume you're referring to the third paragraph here.
Thank you. I was about to direct Mr. Lawrence's attention to the third paragraph.
Yeah. Okay, so what is your question about this sentence, Mr. Petroselli?
So does this sentence indicate that at this stage, plans were ready to be submitted to contractors?
Yes.
So would that indicate that this factory was not yet built?
I don't know that.
Okay. Well, if contractors did not yet have plans, is it likely that contractors would not yet have constructed the factory?
Objection. Speculation.
I'm asking for a reasonable
I'm going to overrule the objection. If you know, Mr. Lawrence, you may answer, and if you don't know, just say you don't know.
I don't know.
But moving on, scrolling up a little bit in this article, does the first sentence state the Arrowhead, please read, can you read that first sentence, please?
The Arrowhead Hot Springs Company is to construct a bottling works at the famous Mineral Springs.
Okay.
Okay.
We'd let him finish the whole sentence since you asked him to read it.
All right. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Lawrence.
As already noted in the Sun, and the bottled water is to be placed on the market of the country.
Okay. Thank you. The phrase is to construct. Does that indicate an action that would have occurred in the future?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So if this factory was to be constructed in the future, would it have been bottling water at this time?
No.
Okay. Can we scroll down a little bit? A little bit more. A little bit more. More. More.
Okay, do you want us to zoom out?
I think it's all the way at the bottom, but.
Okay, why don't you?
So,
okay, what's your question?
Stop. That's at the bottom where this says clipped by Amanda Fry 6. Is that Amanda Fry who's participating in this hearing?
Objection.
What's your basis for objection, Ms. Grady?
He has no basis to know what Ms. Fry's handles are on various websites.
Well, he does know how he got this document, though, so I'm going to overrule the objection. Mr. Lawrence, if you know, you may answer, and if you don't know, you may say you don't know.
Can you repeat the question, please, Mr. Petro?
Is this a document that you obtained from Amanda Fry?
Is this a document that I obtained from Amanda Fry?
Yes.
Is that the question?
Yes.
No.
Was this a document that Amanda Fry initially obtained?
I have no idea.
Okay. I'd like to go to page 8, please. If we can zoom in.
Whoops. I think it's there. That's the what. Okay, that looks good. We have page 8 of exhibit BTB 12 now.
Okay, can we scroll down just a little bit? I want the date of the news article visible. To act well up.
You have to scroll up. It's up
the
at
other
the
way.
top.
Yeah.
Just go a little
Higher.
farther up. There.
Oh, that was it.
Right there. Bing,
Here we
stop.
are.
All right, thank you. This is a little tricky. We're doing the best we can, but I think that says it states it's from the Los Angeles Times from 11 October of 1912.
Is that correct? Would you agree with that, Mr. Lawrence?
October 11, 1912.
Okay,
I agree.
thank you. According to this article, what are you, excuse me, I'll ask you first. Are you familiar with this newspaper article?
I don't recall.
Okay. Does this newspaper article indicate that the bottling plant was in operation?
Does not.
Okay. Can you read that last sentence, please?
A bottling plant to bottle the Arrowhead water is also designed.
Okay. Does this, okay, by that sentence, would that indicate that the factory has been built?
I would say it indicates that this bottling plant referenced has not been built.
Okay, merely designed. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay. Does this article indicate where the factory would have been located?
It does not.
Okay. Can you read that first sentence, please?
Improvements to cost $30,000 will be commenced at the Arrowhead Hot Springs Hotel.
Okay. So is this article about improvements occurring at the Arrowhead Hot Springs Hotel?
It appears to be.
Okay. And the bottling plant described in this article, would it, given that this article is about improvements at the Hot Springs Hotel, would the bottling plant described in this article be one of those improvements planned to occur at the hotel?
I have no idea.
Okay. But this is an article about improvements that were planned to begin at the
Objection.
hotel.
Asked and answered. Argumentative.
I'm going to sustain the objection. Mr. Petrozelli, I think he has said he has no idea.
Okay.
I think you need to move on.
Okay.
I mean, it's in fairness to Mr. Lawrence, there's some limitation on how much he can interpret a 1912 article. Now, I have allowed you to ask the questions because he did offer these newspaper articles into evidence and clearly has some knowledge about them. So I'm allowing you to ask him questions that basically where he can testify about the context of these things. But I think he's answered this one as best as he can, and you need to move on.
All right. If we can go back to, if we can go to page 4. Actually, if we can go back to your testimony at, strike that. If we can go to, it is page 4, line 27. I'm sorry, it's in your testimony.
Wait, Mr. Petrozelli, which exhibit do you want us to put up now?
BTB 10.
Okay, BTB 10.
Same paragraph, line 27.
Okay.
Okay.
And just, oh, you should have just left it right there because it went on to the next page, but that's okay.
Okay. And actually, if you could start reading that sentence, AHSH in line 27, and I believe it continues to the next page. So if
it does. So go ahead, Mr. Lawrence, and we'll scroll to the next page when you, there we go. Nice. All right.
AHSH also built its own factory in Los Angeles in 1917, which was in the planning stages prior to 1914, based upon local newspaper articles at the time.
Okay. So if we could go back to BTB 12, page 2. And I'd like to focus on the third column. It's roughly the bottom third. And we'll want to zoom in.
Okay, we're getting there.
Okay. Actually, I'm sorry, if we could zoom out first. I'd like the date of the article to be visible so we can identify the date.
Okay, and I can help out here. At the top, the date says Saturday, September 22, 1917.
Okay.
This
Thank
is the
you.
Los Angeles Evening Herald. And now I assume you want to scroll down.
And Mr. Lawrence, would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Now if we can scroll back down and zoom in on the article. The article states, what is the title of the article?
Arrowhead Springs plant completed.
Is this the Arrowhead Springs bottling plant located in downtown Los Angeles?
It appears to be Washington and Compton Avenue.
Okay, thank you. And this article is dated 1917 again.
September 22nd, 1917.
Are you familiar with this article?
I believe so.
Okay. Does this article indicate when the factory was planned?
I can't see the entire article.
Okay.
Okay, we can scroll through it.
Can I ask, is there a line you'd like to focus our attention, Mr. Petrozelli?
I'm just wondering if there is anything in this article indicating when the factory was planned. Mr. Lawrence, in his written testimony, he says this factory was planned prior to 1914. So I'm asking if there is anything in this article indicating when it was planned.
All right, wait. Excuse me, Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Petrozelli, I'm going to object because I think you really are, you're asking some misleading questions here, and I think we need to get this cleared up. The testimony of Mr. Lawrence, the written testimony that you read, said based on local newspaper articles at this time, and he never said it was this article. So I think that the appropriate question to ask him, if you want to pursue this line of questioning, is what newspaper articles at the time was Mr. Lawrence referring to? I think that'll get us there a lot faster.
That's where I was going, but
okay, well, let's just get there.
Mr. Lawrence, can you identify a newspaper article within this exhibit that indicates the downtown Los Angeles bottling plant was planned before 1914.
Can I go back and look at my testimony, please?
An objection that's vague as to what is being asked.
Again, I'm going to, let's, Mr. Wooldridge, please put up BTB 10, pages 4 and 5 again. And they're right there. Don't move it at all because it'll jump. So I'm going to just cut through this, Mr. Petrozelli. And I'm going to ask Mr. Lawrence a couple of questions here because I think we can get this done a lot more quickly. Mr. Lawrence, the last phrase in this sentence, which is line 1 of page 5, says, based on local newspaper articles at the time. Do you see that?
I do.
So please just tell us which local newspaper articles at the time you are referring to here.
Sure. So it's in my experience in citing and working on a citing of factories is what I base that on. The newspaper articles all showing the facility being constructed and also into service to me means that it was being planned prior to 1914, based on my experience, not on the newspaper article.
Okay, well, so wait a minute, and I'm sorry, Mr. Petrozelli, but I do want to follow up on this. Are there any specific newspaper articles in BTB 12 that you are referring to here when you say based on local newspaper articles at the time?
Mr. Lilly, I object that we're subjecting Mr. Lawrence to a very specific granular memory test. But to help this proceeding along, if we can pull this last newspaper article up and direct Mr. Lawrence's attention to the very last paragraph of that article, I think we could be a lot more efficient.
Okay, well, right now, I would like him to answer my question, which is, does he have, because I don't even know if we're looking at the right article here. So, Mr. Lawrence, do you have a specific article or articles in mind when you wrote this text here?
Mr. Lilly, I'm going to object again. We're asking Mr. Lawrence, when we've gone through in the last week, hundreds and hundreds of documents, to say exactly which one he had. Mr. Petrozelli was asking questions about a particular article. He had one up. I asked him a particular line. As I was scrolling through, I too am struggling to remember which document was which. We quite candidly had some issues with newspaper articles not translating and being legible when we converted them to electronic format or tried to upload them to the site. So again, to assist the process and
objection to the extent counsel is about to to coach the witness and testify.
All right. I've heard enough. The objection is overruled. Mr. Lawrence, please answer my question if you can. And if you don't know or don't remember, you may say so.
I don't know exactly what article. The article that was up was one of the articles that I was referencing.
All right. So with that, let's go forward. Mr. Petrozelli, you may proceed either with more questions about this article, or if you have other questions, you may proceed.
Mr. Lawrence, do you know if the articles referenced in your testimony are included in your exhibits?
Yes.
Do you know, can you direct us to any of those articles?
Same objection.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the objection is overruled. The answer is accepted, no. So I'd suggest that at this point, this is probably an issue that's best addressed further in closing briefs as appropriate, but Mr. Petrozelli, you may proceed with your questioning.
Okay, moving on. If we can go to paragraph 18. And if you can read that first sentence, I'm pretty sure it's one sentence from line 2 through line 6. Please, Mr. Lawrence.
Cold water in Waterman canyons to collect and bottle spring water as early.
Wait.
Starting in-
Start with the in addition thing, please.
My apologies. I thought he said sentence number 2. In addition to the appropriation of sale of spring water, we know from historical records that pipelines were constructed in Strawberry, Coldwater, and Waterman canyons to collect and bottle spring water as early as 1909, and likely earlier based on engineering drawings discovered in company files that were made by an engineer by the name of E.T. Ham of California Consolidated Water Company.
And does this paragraph reference your exhibit BTB2?
I'm not sure.
Can you read
Okay,
that?
well, I'll just help out Mr. Lawrence. He's just now referring to the last sentence where it does say, which is identified as BTB, exhibit BTB2.
Oh, yes, it does. Sorry.
Okay.
I should have read on.
Yeah,
that's
so
fine.
if we can look at BTB2.
Okay.
And yeah, thank you. And I believe you previously testified that you participated in the preparation of this.
Yes.
Okay, so you're familiar with it.
Yes.
Okay. Was this report submitted before or after issuance of the 2017 ROI? I'll rephrase that. Was this report submitted before or after issuance of the 2017 report of investigation?
After.
Okay. And if we can go to page 12, and it's page 12 of the PDF.
That's good. That's the way we can locate it most readily, is to use those page numbers. So here we have page 12 of the PDF file displayed. Let us know where you want us to scroll to.
If we can focus on the second paragraph, and more specifically, I think it's the fourth line.
Okay, and just to be clear, it's the first, the paragraph above carries over from the prior page. So this is the first full paragraph, which begins, spring water was collected from Strawberry Canyon. And is that where you wanted to go to the fourth line of that?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the sentence that begins the existence of these pipelines?
Yes. Can you read that, please, Mr.
Sure.
Lawrence?
The existence
Mr. Lilly, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, I'm just trying to help us scroll through these documents. So please go ahead, Mr. Lawrence.
The existence of these pipelines is confirmed by a set of pipeline drawings prepared by E.T. Ham in 1931.
And does this sentence reference Exhibit 1 to this? I'll call it a report.
I would have to. Yes, it does.
Okay, so we'll cover that in a moment. But I wanted to scroll down to I think it's the third paragraph, starting with as stated above. Okay.
What's your question?
Does this paragraph reference a letter drafted by a Mr. Byron Waters?
Yes.
Was Mr. Byron Waters the attorney for the Arrowhead Springs Corporation at that time?
I don't know.
Okay. Reading down to the reference to the letter. What is the date of the letter?
February 14, 1929.
Okay, thank you. So, and can you read the paragraph that the letter that is from the letter that is quoted here?
Uh, s- Starting with the title 2.
Actually, if you could read this, if you could read in the second line in the third paragraph, that sentence.
Can we clarify which is the third paragraph? I've
the
lost
paragraph.
my confused. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's the paragraph beginning as stated above. So if we can,
Okay.
if Mr. Lawrence can read the sentence starting with "but reference."
Thank you.
Yeah.
But reference to the pipeline's construction can also be found in the Byron Waters letter cited in the ROI at page 16, which clearly refers to the appropriation of water from Indian Springs by ASC.
Okay, and the date of this letter is February 14, 1929. Was that correct?
Right.
Okay. I know you already answered that, but we were a little indirect in getting here, and I wanted to be clear about these historical dates. And again, was Indian Springs in Coldwater Canyon?
No.
Was Indian Spring in Waterman Canyon?
No.
Okay. So going back to the E.T. Ham drawings, can we go to page 35 of this exhibit? And it's page 35 of the PDF.
Okay, we have page 35 up.
Okay, Mr. Lawrence, is this exhibit 1?
Objection, vague.
All right, I think we can cut through this. Is this exhibit 1 to this document, Mr. Lawrence?
Yes.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Petrozelli.
Can we scroll to the next page, please? Mr. Lawrence, do you recognize this drawing?
I do.
Is this one of E.T. Ham's drawings?
It appears to be. I can't see the legend.
Okay. Would it help if we zoomed in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
And was this prepared for the California Consolidated Water Company?
Yes.
And was that one of the predecessors of BlueTriton?
Yes.
Okay. Let's zoom out so we can see the whole diagram. Okay. Does this drawing depict pipelines for Waterman Canyon, Coldwater Canyon, and Strawberry Canyon?
It appears to, yes.
Okay.
And excuse me, Mr. Petrozelli, but I want to clarify so that the record is clear. The typeface that says Waterman Canyon Pipeline, Coldwater Canyon Pipeline, and Strawberry Canyon Pipeline appears to have been added to the drawing. Do you know, Mr. Lawrence, if in fact that type was added to the original drawing prepared by Mr. Ham?
Yes, I believe that was added for ease of recognition there.
Okay, so who added that and when did they add it?
That I don't know.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Mr. Petrozelli.
Do any of the pipelines depicted in this drawing extend to the current Arrowhead Springs?
I cannot tell.
Would it help if we zoomed in?
Please do.
And Mr. Petrozelli, I think you better clarify what you mean by the current Arrowhead Springs. That is unclear to me.
Okay. So by the current Arrowhead Springs, I mean those springs that issue in the draft cease and desist order: Spring 1, Spring 2, Spring 3, Spring 7, and Spring 8, and 10 through 12.
Okay. So, Mr. Lawrence, please let us know how you want us to zoom in or out.
Yeah, if we could zoom into the right, about where the cursor is, yeah, right there. Little further, please. Yeah, it is unclear what extends to where. The pipeline doesn't show any terminus there.
So you can't confirm that this pipeline would have extended all the way up to springs 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, and 10 through 12.
This one just, from what I can see, it says Cienegas at this location, and that's it.
All right, that's fine. So if we can look at page 37, I think that's the next page. And if we can zoom in, I think it's in the upper right-hand corner. Actually, I'd like to ask if we can look at the whole drawing first. Mr. Lawrence, is this another one of E.T. Ham's drawings?
It appears to be a survey of E.T. Ham.
Okay, so if we can zoom in, I think it is in the upper right-hand corner. If you can identify the date of this drawing.
It appears to say of February 11, 1929.
Oh, thank you. So if we can go back to your testimony at paragraph 21, and by your testimony, I mean BTB 10. Okay. I believe can you read that sentence starting in line 19?
BTB collects spring water entirely by gravity flow from the tunnels and borings.
Okay, thank you.
Flow, was that
That's
it?
just that one sentence.
Okay.
Okay. So if the collection is solely by gravity, that means no pumping is used. Would that be correct?
Correct.
Okay. And is it correct that you use the term spring water in this sentence?
Yes.
Not groundwater.
Correct.
Okay. Does BlueTriton collect spring water that would naturally flow to the surface without pumping?
I don't know how to answer that. Can you ask the question again?
Is the water collected by BlueTriton, and I'll be more specific, is the spring water collected by BlueTriton water that would naturally flow to the surface?
Objection. Vague. We've
Well,
got a bunch of
how
points.
how about we look at BTB 3?
Yeah, I guess that means that Mr. Petrozelli is withdrawing that question. It's going to ask another question. So please proceed, Mr. Petrozelli.
We can look at the page 2 in the last paragraph. And can you read the sentence in the last paragraph, line 2, starting with because?
Because the spring water collection system collects water that naturally flows to the surface without pumping, collections are directly impacted by the variation of flows at each spring site throughout the year.
Okay, thank you. So that's fine. So if we can go back to your testimony at paragraph 22.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe you discussed this in your direct testimony. So I don't believe I need to revisit this in order to reorient you. But this paragraph discusses the overflow discharge. Would that be correct?
Objection. The states.
Well, how about Mr. Lawrence, can you read the first sentence in this paragraph, please?
At SBNF's request, BTB studied and in 2020, the San Bernardino National Forest granted BTB approval to discharge overflow water into an area within the San Bernardino National Forest rather than outside of the forest.
Right. So was that approval granted?
Yes.
Okay. And I think you indicated the location in your direct testimony, but where is that approved overflow location?
Not sure how you'd like me to describe that.
Okay. Can you identify the location where the San Bernardino National Forest granted BlueTriton approval to discharge overflow in response in 2020?
I have no way of describing that location to you.
Would you like a map?
A map would help.
Okay. I'll direct you to one in a moment. Is that overflow operation still occurring?
Yes.
Okay. Does overflow return to the East Twin Creek watershed?
Can you share East Twin Creek watershed that you're defining?
Okay. We look at PT 12, page 2. I think there's a map there. Excuse me, prosecution team. I think there's a map there that will perhaps help us.
Okay, we'll get it. I don't think we've opened that exhibit yet this morning, so we have to get it, but we will. Okay, we have PT 12, page 2 up.
Okay. And
maybe, do you want him to zoom in on this at all, Mr. Petroselli? There we go. Go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Lawrence, can you identify on this map approximately where the discharge location is?
Approximately, yes.
Can you do that for us?
I don't know how would you would like me to do this, but below, between the Del Rosa, above the Del Rosa judgment line, below the closest magenta dot.
Are those magenta dots boreholes 10 through 12?
I believe on this map they were defined as helipads, but you'd have to show me the.
Okay,
there you go. Point of diversion. So yes, 10, 11, 12.
Okay. So you said the discharge location was just below this location.
Below 10, 11, 12, above the Del Rosa judgment line on this map.
Okay. And can you, based on this map, can you indicate to what watershed that overflow is discharged to?
Objection. The prosecution team offered testimony that watersheds have various names on various maps yesterday. So it's vague.
I think the best thing, Mr. Petroselli, is just ask him which creek does it discharge into?
that was my next question.
Well, go ahead and ask it.
Can you tell which creek the blue line at where boreholes 10 through 12 are located represents?
Well, from this map, it doesn't appear to be identified correctly, but it is Strawberry Creek.
Okay. So if this blue line represents Strawberry Creek, would the overflow discharge into Strawberry Creek?
Yes.
Okay.
And I have to object just for a second to clean up the record, because I'm just trying to process how this will report on paper, because we've gone from one discussion to the next. And I'm actually trying to make things clear for all of us in the future. So to revisit what you just asked him, can we clarify which line we're talking about and give it some context? There are some markings on the page. I think there's a way it can be done. I just don't want any of us to have a record different from what is trying to be said.
Okay, so Ms. Grady, I think it's pretty clear this, and I'll just see if I can do this and Mr. Lawrence can say yes or no, but this map shows 4 magenta dots and all above a yellow line, which is depicted as Del Rosa Judgment Line. And I believe Mr. Lawrence.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Wait, no, excuse me. I'm talking now. Excuse me. And he testified that the point of discharge was between the lower magenta dot and the Del Rosa Judgment Line on that blue line, which he said should be called Strawberry Creek. Is that correct, Mr. Lawrence?
That's correct.
All right. So, Ms. Grady, do you have any further objection?
Thank you, Mr. Lilly. That was very helpful. I would just correct the record to say there are 5 magenta dots that I see.
I'm sorry.
I agree with you that the one you guys were discussing was of the 5. We are discussing the lowest one, which is near a blue line. And I think that this is very helpful for purposes of the written record. I appreciate that.
All right. Thank you. If I said 4, I meant 5. All right. Thank you for that clarification. So, and thank you, Mr. Lawrence. So with that, Mr. Petrozelli, you may move on.
Okay, thank you. Other than the amount that overflows, is that remaining amount transported for bottling?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, we were talking about water that overflows.
So what is your question, Mr. Petrozelli?
Of the water that BlueTriton diverts from the springs, subtracting the amount that overflows at the location you just identified, is all of that remaining water transported for bottling?
No.
Okay. Is some portion of that remaining water delivered to the owners of the Arrowhead Springs Hotel?
Objection. Vague, just trying to get some clarity about, you use the word springs and collected from.
Okay, maybe you should rephrase the question, Mr. Petrozelli. I'm not sure it was completely clear, so I'll sustain the objection. Go ahead.
Okay. Of the water diverted from springs 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, and 10 through 12 that does not overflow at the discharge location you identified, is all of that water transported for bottling?
No.
Okay. Is any portion of that remaining amount delivered to the current owners of what historically was known as the Arrowhead Springs Hotel?
Yes.
Okay. Is that currently the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians?
Yes, it is.
Okay. That amount delivered to the tribe, the San Manuel Band, is that roughly 20% of the total amount total amount of water diverted from springs 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, and 10 through 12. And perhaps for future reference, I'll simply refer to them as the Arrowhead Springs.
Yes.
Okay.
And excuse me, Mr. Petrozelli, but I just want to get this clarification now. Mr. Lawrence, is it 20% of the net amount after subtracting out the amount that's returned to Strawberry Creek as you discussed, or is it 20% of the gross diverted amount?
Is 20% of the flow through the pipeline.
So the flow through the pipeline that comes down to the vicinity of the hotel.
Correct.
All right, thank you. You may proceed, Mr. Petrozelli.
Yeah, and Mr. Lilly.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Mr. Lilly, can I just lodge a standing objection so I need not interrupt repeatedly? I think the issue of whether BlueTriton brands diverts from springs or collects groundwater is one of the ultimate issues before you. And to the extent this language is being used a little loosely, I'd like there to be just a standing objection noted on the record. The nature of the water at issue is part of the case that's before you.
All right, and I certainly didn't interpret this as addressing that issue, but I will sustain the objection to the extent there's any implication that these questions make some assumption about the type of water or the type of diversion, because I think Mr. Petrozelli is just trying to ask questions about what happens to the water that flows in the pipeline. So I'll sustain the objection to that effect. And Mr. Petrozelli, if you need to clarify these terms, go ahead. But otherwise, I think you may proceed. And I think your questioning makes sense here.
Yeah, Mr. Lilly, I'm just trying to understand the accounting.
Right. Okay. Please proceed.
So, and forgive me if I have to reorient my train of thought a little bit. So, Mr. Lawrence, when you said 20% of the amount of water in the pipeline, was that above or below the point of discharge?
I'm not, I'd have to go and look. I'm not sure.
And again, I'm just trying to understand, like, the accounting, and when we say 20% of what? So is that 20% of all of the water collected from the Arrowhead Springs? Or is it 20% of the water collected from the Arrowhead Springs after that water has been discharged at the overflow point?
Objection, but relevance?
Overruled. You may proceed. Mr. Lawrence, you may answer the question.
As I stated, I am not sure. I'd have to review it. The discharge point is relatively new.
Was, Mr. Lawrence, prior to the 2020 authorization to discharge overflow that you described in your testimony, was overflow previously discharged?
Yes.
Was it at the same location that was approved in 2020?
No.
And if we can go back to the map, would you be able to identify roughly where that location was?
I have to see the map.
Okay.
Okay, let's put up PT 12, page 2. And just zoom out a little bit, please. Okay.
Mr. Lilly, I believe we're past the 1 hour mark. I'd just like to get an estimate of how long, if I noted my time incorrectly, I apologize, but how
Well,
much
you-
longer he's planning to go? I thought we had
Okay.
an estimate, and I know this was a big issue during our cross-examination.
Well, his cross-examination is a lot shorter than BlueTriton's was yesterday. I will say that. But Mr. Petrozelli, do you have a time estimate for how much longer this is going to go?
Maybe 15 minutes.
Okay, I think let's have Mr. Lawrence answer this question, and then we're going to go ahead and take a break because we are getting pretty late. And in fairness to the court reporter, I don't want to go anymore. But Mr. Lawrence, can you answer the question that Mr. Petrozelli asked about where, if you can describe on this map, and there's no way you can point to it, so you have to use words, but describe where was the discharge of overflow water before 2020?
Yes, I can, Mr. Lilly. Approximately at the Arrowhead Springs Hotel location.
All right, so Mr. Petrozelli, is this a logical break point, or do you have some questions regarding this topic that you want to ask before the break?
I think I'm done with this topic, so we could take a break.
Okay, so why don't you just tell us, I mean, I did require BlueTriton to provide offers of proof for their cross-examination when they went over the time limits. So I think in fairness, I should ask you that same thing, but I think you said approximately 15 more minutes. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what topics do you plan to cover here?
I wanted to ask about the quantities reported in the extraction reports that are filed under the Recordation Act.
Okay, is that your only topic?
And I wanted to get some clarification about how they're now measuring flow.
Okay, is that it?
And I think that will be adequate.
Okay, so, and we are going, this is okay. This is what hearings are for. We are going a little later than expected. I know Mr. Lowe said he wanted to wrap up or has to leave before 2. I actually don't see him on. Mr. Lowe, are you still here? We may have lost Mr. Lowe.
And, you know, Mr. Lilly,
yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, I'm on now. I had to move because my iPad ran out of power.
That's,
so I'm
that's
now
fine.
on my phone.
All right, so Mr. Petrozelli, we may have to let Mr. Lowe go ahead and then come back to you.
I was just going to ask if we could do that.
I made arrangements, you guys, for my daughter to take care of my family situation. So I can go ahead and do this after the break if that's okay.
Okay, then we will have Mr. Petrozelli wrap up. We're going to break until 1:45. Mr. Petrozelli will finish at approximately 2 o'clock, but that was not a firm commitment. So Mr. Lowe, I will allow you to start your cross-ex questions at approximately 2 o'clock, but plus or minus some.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Will that work? All right. Is there anything else we need to cover before we take our lunchtime break?
Did we say when we're coming back?
Yes. If I didn't, I will now. Thank you, Mr. Petrozelli. That's a pretty important question.
I wasn't sure if I missed it.
Well, it's good if we all come back at the same time. So we will come back it's now 12:40. We will come back at 1:45. And just a reminder for the lunch break, you do need to log off now and then log back on at 1:45. So thank you all for your patience. And I will see everybody at 1:45.